The ring that doesn't fit, don't move. Listen. The first sound is coal, coal in the flues, coal making the house breathe like a sleeping animal. Then the clock, a bronze creature on a mantle, striking the hour with a self-satisfied cough. The taas, bed beneath you, is not yours. It's too high, too hard, stuffed with horsehair that pricks in secret places. And the smell is London. Damp stone, old polish, wet wool drying somewhere out of sight. You were born to the bright, salty air of Newport summers and the clean winter bite of Fifth Avenue. This is not that. Your eyes take in a canopy heavy as a throne. Pale May daylight seeps around curtains the color of bruised plums. You lift your left hand, the hand your mother told you not to fidget with in public, and the ring winks back. Diamonds like ice chips. A sapphire. Deep as midnight. Water. It slides loosely on your finger because it was made for someone else a century ago. Someone who learned to breathe in rooms like this. Good morning, Your Grace. The woman appears as if she stepped out from a panel in the wall. She is small, upright, brisk, gray eyes that miss nothing, and a mouth set to a line that could cut taffeta. I'm Mrs. Lyle, she says, your lady's maid. If we open the curtains now, the fog may not sulk all day. You nod because you can't find the place in your throat where words are meant to come from. Mrs. Lyle draws the curtains. London hisses into the room. A distant tram bell, hoofbeats on wet cobbles, a hawker calling something you don't yet speak, though it's supposed to be English. You try the name on your tongue. This is Ashbourne House? On Grosvenor Square, Your Grace. His Grace requests you at 9 in the morning room. Mrs. Lyle tilts her head, assessing you the way a seamstress looks at a roll of silk. Do you prefer coffee or chocolate? Tea goes without saying. Coffee, you say, and the word tastes like home. You are Evelyn Mercer now, Evelyn, Duchess of Ashbourne, if one wants to be formal about catastrophes. You were Evelyn Harper Mercer 2 weeks ago, daughter of Benjamin. Mercer, rails and steamships, and the uncanny American trick of turning opportunity into empire. Your father calculated your wedding as coolly as a ledger. Manhattan marble exchanged for English limestone. New money poured into old stone until both glittered acceptably. The crossing should have been 8 days. It was 11. You learned. The color of the Atlantic when it decides not to love you back. Your mother never once loosened her grip on etiquette. Not even while the ship rolled like a beast shaking rain from its pelt. Sit straight. Smile softly. Never ask what you will be allowed to keep of yourself. Your underthings are warming, Mrs. Lyle says with the professional cheer of a battlefield nurse. I'll ring for hot water. You let the house take you like a tide, the washstand, the steaming porcelain pitcher, the chill of the room that eats your breath and the heat of the water that gives it back. Your skin tightens under a linen towel that smells faintly of lemon. For a second, just one, you see yourself as a stranger might, not a duchess. A 20-year-old girl trying to find the edges of a life she didn't choose. The gowns you brought have been removed from your trunks, quietly, as though someone lifted a child from a nursery it had outgrown. In their place are garments that feel like architecture, a corset that narrows breathing from a hallway to a keyhole, a navy morning dress with cuffs you could use to cut butter, boots that look like they never learned to run. Mrs. Lyle, you manage when the laces find their keenest purpose. Must I breathe this little? A duchess breathes as much as she needs and not a stitch more, she says. We will find your measure. You have 40 minutes, enough time to think of Arthur. Arthur is your husband, a sentence that feels like wearing another woman's perfume. He is not unkind. That is not the same as being kind. He is handsome, the way British portraits are. Straight nose, high brow, a mouth that knows not to smile too quickly. In New York, he was a story, a title, a problem to be solved. In London, he will be a climate. The house is a geography lesson taught by footsteps. Mrs. Lyle guides you through corridors that creep with oil portraits, Ashbournes with joints carved from duty and patience, wives with skin the color of empty china. There are vases the size of young trees and carpets woven like equations. The air is warmer here, and you realize the way a house reveals itself is like the way a person does, room by room, some open, some locked, some pretending to be one thing while being another. The morning room has windows so tall they could be mistakes. The view is a square of clipped English green with a gate that pretends not to keep people out. Arthur stands with his back to the light, reading a newspaper that insists it will be the last to know anything. His coat is cut like a decision. "Evelyn," he says without looking up. "Not my dear. Not even good morning." He sets the paper aside and studies you, cataloging. You wonder if he sees you the way he sees a new horse. Shoulders, stride, temperament. "You slept?" he asks. "Enough." You say, "You did not." "The bed, and you quarreled all night, and the bed won." He nods. "You will meet Lady Sibley this afternoon. She will help you with orientation." "Orientation," you repeat, as if you are a compass needle that needs convincing where north is. "She's guided every Ashbourne bride since my grandmother," he continues. "She understands that what is suitable is more durable than what is merely fashionable." It's a sentence that reveals him completely. Durable over fashionable. Suitable over everything. You think about how in America, suitable is what a dress is before a girl takes scissors to it. A footman appears as if summoned by thought. Coffee, toast, something that smells faintly of fish and fear. You watch Arthur butter his roll with the precision of someone negotiating a treaty. He asks about your comfort, your trunks, whether Mrs. Lyle suits you. His questions are checklists, not curiosities. How much of the house is... You search for a word that won't betray sincerity. "Mine," Arthur considers. "You will be mistress of this house and of Ashbourne Park in Kent. You'll direct the staff. It is your duty to be seen and to render the family visible. You will preside where presiding is required. Be seen. Render visible. Preside." He speaks as though he is placing chess pieces. You can almost hear them click on the board. King, queen, rooks. They all move differently. He expects you to be the piece that travels across long, straight lines and threatens anyone who comes too close. "You are very quiet," he says. "There are a dozen answers, and you choose the safest. I'm still learning the furniture of the air." He almost smiles. "Lady Sibley will assist. In New York, you would have argued. In London, you take note. You will learn here as you learned your father's ledgers, by reading what's in ink and what isn't." After breakfast, the house declares itself. A butler named Pierce who wears dignity like a waistcoat and calls you "Your Grace" as if the words can't taste of iron. A housekeeper, Mrs. Wilkes, who looks like she could crouch and wrestle the lowest boiler into obedience. A social secretary, Miss Fortescue, thin, keen-eyed, carrying a stack of calling cards as if they are ammunition. "There will be callers," Miss Fortescue says. "You need not receive them all, but to ignore the right ones would be costly." Costly. Your mother's favorite word when she taught you to smile without showing teeth. You glance at the tray. Names like architectural drawings, Pembroke, Mowbray, Follett, Westmarch. You can hear the story people will tell about you already. American heiress saves noble house. The arithmetic is simple, so people like to repeat it. "Send my regrets." "This morning," you say. "This afternoon I meet Lady Sibley." "Yes, Your Grace." Left alone for a breath, you cross to the window. Outside, a gardener tends to a rectangle of roses with the severity of a judge. In your reflection, the ring glints. It was never sized for you. It is the history you married, trying to claim you through circumference. You press your thumb against the metal until it hurts, and the pain helps. The pain says, "You are still here. Hook for retention. Stay with me. The woman hired to turn you into a duchess is waiting, and she does not believe in mercy. The woman who trains. Queen's Lady Sibley arrives promptly at 2, as punctuality is the first weapon she deploys against chaos. She is not tall, but she has the posture of a drawn sword. Black silk ripples around her like a spill of ink. 2 pearls. At the ear, 1 at the throat, no more. Elegance that refuses to glitter. Her face is a study in convictions. Eyebrows that brook no nonsense, a calm set to the mouth that suggests she has buried nonsense with honors. Your Grace, she says, and her curtsy is a perfect hinge. May we begin? You consider asking what exactly you are beginning. You do not ask. Please. She sits without being asked to and gestures that you should do the same. You are American, she says, as if diagnosing consumption. I am. Very well. Americans can be trained. The ashy English sunlight fingers the room. You place your hands in your lap. They suddenly look like tools you don't know how to use. Lady Sibley's eyes register this, and she takes a slim notebook from her reticule. Your voice, she begins. It must carry but never travel. English rooms are boxes that test women. If you are heard too well, you are vulgar. If not at all, you are irrelevant. We will tune you. She stands. You stand. She walks you, not across the carpet, but through categories. How to enter a room without appearing to. How to accept a compliment without owing an apology. How to allow a man to lead you without conceding ground. How to signal to a servant with a fraction of a gesture, because outright pointing is for people no one will remember. At some point, your corset stops being a garment and becomes the outline of a map. Again, she says, when your curtsy dips an inch too deep. You are honoring sovereignty, not proposing marriage. Save your spine. You want to laugh. The impulse terrifies you, and so you disguise it as breath. Yes, Lady Sibley. There are lists for morning callers, lists for what you may discuss, which is weather, charity, music, gardens, without ever admitting you have preferences about any of them. Lists for what you must never discuss, money, politics, religion, repairs. Lists for how to sit with bracelets, how to avoid being trapped in conversation by a bore, how to become, when necessary, a bore yourself to escape a trap. Boredom is the only insult English society will not call by its name. She watches you attempt tea service as if the tray contains explosives. Tea is choreographed humility, she says. You pour as though you are grateful. You are not grateful. You are gracious. That is different. Is there a difference? Gratitude is personal, she says. Graciousness is structural. You are the structure in this house. She forces you to practice names. Countesses and their daughters, the prince's intimates and enemies, the matrons who control invitations the way bankers control loans, the Americans already naturalized by marriage and donation. You will forget none of them, she says. You will forget yourself before you forget them. Lady Sibley, you ask, when your mouth has dried into felt. Was it like this for you? She considers. I was born in Dorset. My father lost 3 fortunes before he learned to drink cheaply. I married a man with a waistcoat and an address and taught him how to hold the world as though it belonged to him. He died in an easy chair, reading Latin. I taught 3 duchesses, 6 countesses, and an actress with a genius for repentance. I dislike oysters and adore practical shoes. I am not sentimental. Now walk. So you walk. She corrects your gait as if you are a violin she intends to tune to London's note. Smaller steps. Your ankles belong to mystery, not the street. Hold your head like you are wearing intelligence. The cruel part is that this is easier than you feared. Your body understands choreography even if your heart resents it. You have been trained for performance since you were 15, and your mother began rehearsals. America prepares girls to be chosen. England prepares women to keep what they have been chosen for. Tomorrow, Lady Sibley says, closing her notebook. We shall practice the garden party protocols. Her Majesty will not forgive an error, though she may not notice a triumph. That is the shape of power. You will respect it. Her Majesty, you say, and terror and curiosity spar in your stomach like dueling cats. Also, she adds, almost as an afterthought, your accent. You will not erase it. That would be a lie, and the English prefer their lies subtler. But you will sand it. Soften the American edges that sound like declarations, and learn the English edges that sound like apologies meant as commands. My father says the person who apologizes least wins the room. Then your father has never met a duchess who knows her work, Lady Sibley says. We win rooms with sorries that do not concede, and thank yous that cost nothing. When she's gone, the house feels taller. You sink into a chair as if you have been practicing sinking. Mrs. Lyle enters with the look she reserves for battle. Damage. She loosens your laces like a general treating a wound. You did well, she says. I've seen girls crumple like meringue. How many girls have you turned into duchesses? You ask. Mrs. Lyle lifts a shoulder. Poor and rich. American and English, we all squeak at the same places. The trick is to keep walking while you squeak. You laugh, and the laugh tastes like relief. In the mirror, you catch a stranger, chin lifted. Your mother would approve of this stranger. Your father would appraise her and nod. A tray arrives. Correspondence, calling cards, a note in a hand you don't recognize. The loop's elegant but purposeful. Miss Fortescue hovers. Shall I? She asks. You nod and she reads. Invitations, teas, a musicale hosted by Lady Duncliffe, who is apparently dangerous because she cultivates poets, and poets cultivate scandal. A dinner at Lord Westmarch's, townhouse. A charity committee for widows of the Docklands. That one pricks your attention. Something that smells like real need amid the pageantry. There's one more, Miss Fortescue says, hesitant. From Lady Catherine Remington. The name stirs nothing until she adds, Boston-born, married Lord Remington 7 years ago. They live on Park Lane. An American, you say before you can help yourself. Naturalized English. Miss Fortescue corrects, and there is an edge in the phrasing that says which half of that she considers the improvement. She requests a short call tomorrow, 3 o'clock. You imagine a woman who crossed this same gray Atlantic, was folded into rooms like this, trained by a woman like Lady Sibley, taught the difference between gracious and grateful, and did not drown. Yes, you say, accept. When Miss Fortescue leaves, you open the last note yourself. It is not an invitation. It is a receipt. No, a statement from a bank you do not know, acknowledging the transfer of a considerable sum. The figure takes your breath, but not because of its size, because it is addressed to the Duke of Ashbourne, and it references the Chelsea account. You are not an accountant. You are your father's daughter. You know the shape of numbers. When they slant toward ruin, and these tilt, you fold the paper once, then again. No one taught you the etiquette for this feeling, the sudden knowledge that something is wrong beneath the carpets. You know you must not run to Arthur with the receipt like a child with a nettle sting. You know you must not ignore it. You know you must begin to count. Retention hook. Tomorrow brings 2 teachers, one appointed by society, one appointed by survival. Only one will tell you the truth. The Embassy of American Women Lady. Catherine Remington's house on Park Lane greets, You like an excellent liar. All charm, no effort showing. In the hall, lamps glow as if they invented light, and a footman whitens his gloves with a cloth in case of surprise inspections. You are announced as the Duchess of Ashbourne, and the title floats into the drawing room like a ship that has just learned how to dock. Catherine rises. She is in her 30s, tall, laughing lines at the eyes earned honestly, hair the color of a Boston autumn. Her dress is an apology to fashion and a love letter to herself. She curtsies. You curtsy. Someone brings tea and closes the doors with, a sound like a secret sliding into place. "Evelyn," she says, "your name, not your rank. And it is a kindness so precise it could count as surgery. Welcome to the embassy." "The embassy? Of American women," she says. "We operate behind enemy lines with excellent refreshments." You smile despite your corset. "Are we at war?" "With exhaustion," she says. "With game. Boards we didn't design. With gentlemen who confuse inheritance with character. But there are treaties. She pours tea the way Lady Sibley taught you, but hers tastes of companionship, not test. She asks you 2 questions no one else has bothered with. What do you miss? What do you want to keep? The answers leap up, embarrassed by how ready they've been. I miss rooms where laughter happens quickly, streets that smell like rain, and coffee, not just rain. I miss not being watched for errors I haven't invented yet. I want to keep my father's habit of telling me the truth, even when it's inconvenient. I want to keep reading newspapers to the end of the column. I want to keep a voice that belongs to me. Good, she says, satisfied. Those can be protected, with care. There are others. They come in 2s and 3s, announced lightly, and the room changes without losing its center. A Mrs. Winchester from Chicago who made her husband's debts rearrange themselves through the application of stubbornness. A Louisa Harding who learned to run a household with the efficiency of a San Francisco shipping office after watching her English mother-in-law weep into the accounts. A Sarah whose title is so old it smells like mothballs and whose patience is young enough to pick locks. They do not ask your pedigree. They ask what Lady Sibley is like. A sword, you say, and they nod. And whether Arthur is a man who understands the difference between privacy and secrecy. You do not know yet, and say so. And nobody makes you feel stupid for not knowing. We meet Fridays, Catherine says, when the conversation has moved through weather and charity and music and arrived, without fuss, at strategy. We call it sewing. The needlework is optional. The work is not. What work? Survival, Louisa says. And the subcategory called improvement. We are not a cabal, Sarah adds. We are women who would like the ladders we climbed to be less rickety for the next girl. Someone mentions Her Majesty's garden party. Someone else mentions Lady Duncliffe's musicale and the way poets are both fashionable and disastrous. Mrs. Winchester leans forward. Most important rule, she says, eyes bright. Friends you choose, allies you cultivate, family you accept with diplomacy, enemies you schedule. Never let an enemy choose the hour. Your laugh comes easy here. My mother would put that on a cushion. Your mother, Catherine says gently, sent you to a foreign country with good dresses and an iron spine. We can use both. There is a moment, and you see them recognize it, when the room decides it will keep you. In a different life, you would cry from relief. In this life, you adjust your cuff and lean in when they begin to talk numbers. They do not ask for gossip. They ask for figures. What are Ashbourne's acres? How many tenancies? What's mortgaged? How many houses? 2 town? 1 country? Where does the coal come from? What's being spent on what? You confess that you've seen only the household ledger, and that by accident you saw a bank communication referencing something in Chelsea. Chelsea, Catherine repeats, and the word is not geography now. It is category. A house? Louisa asks. Or a person? I don't know. Mrs. Winchester sips, sets her cup down like a gavel. Find out. Quietly, a lady's maid sees everything and says nothing if she is paid properly. A butler knows more and says less unless the house is in danger. The study holds the truth in ledgers. Men believe drawers are safer than memory. They are wrong. My father taught me, you say, that curiosity is a compliment you pay to the world. He also taught me discretion is how you pay yourself back. Then you were well taught, Sarah says. Your task is not to accuse. Your task is to learn the shape of the hole before you start filling it. A knock. The door opens. A young man, fair, eyes the merciless blue that English skies save for brief afternoons, steps in with the slightly apologetic air of a gentleman who knows he is intruding by invitation. "Apologies," he says. "Catherine, you said 3 was discreet. I am 10 minutes late to be in character." "Lord James Remington," Catherine says to you. "Brother-in-law, useful in emergencies and Fridays." "Your Grace," he says, and bows with a correctness that does not feel like surrender. "Welcome to the column of air where American women keep London standing." "Lord Remington," you say. "He is not Arthur, and that difference is a relief you will not entertain." James, he asks you to call him James when no one is listening, has the gift of explaining complicated things as if he's bored with how easy they are. He speaks lightly about markets and ugly reality. He mentions with caution that the track has not been kind to certain dukes this year. You do not ask how he knows. You do not tell him what you found folded like a confession. You are learning which parts of yourself to pour into which cups. "May I?" he asks Catherine. "Say something indelicate?" "No," says Sarah with fondness. "Say it in a way that makes it sound philanthropic." James turns to you. "It will be said that English houses take American money. That is false. English houses rent American women. Your duty is to keep the terms fair. You feel your spine do what Lady Sibley trained it for. And when they are not, negotiate," he says, "with terms, not tears. When you leave, a footman brings your carriage and London is rimmed in late light, a trick of sun that makes even soot glamorous. You sit back against the seat and list what you have. A teacher with a sword for a spine, a circle that refuses to apologize for surviving, a man who is not your husband and who speaks in sentences that do not smell like ownership, and a piece of paper that says Chelsea in a way that is beginning to hurt. At home, Arthur is out. The house relishes his absence differently. It is not that the staff prefer you. It is that they understand you will not break the rhythm of their competence to demonstrate your own. You go to the study you have not been invited to because you live here now and will not live here like a ghost. You do not expect the bottom drawer to give up its secret easily. You do not expect the key to be exactly where your father taught you to look, not too hidden for a man to remember, not too obvious for a servant to find. Third shelf, second book, a battered copy of Plutarch's Lives, an Englishman's idea of virtue and cover. The drawer unlocks as though it has been waiting to. Ledgers, receipts, letters in a hand you do not recognize. The ledgers show what numbers do when they are not policed. They march downhill politely. Debts paid off after your wedding like an army dismissed. New debts enrolled as if they were honor guards. Winnings and losses at the track, too many of the latter. A property in Chelsea leased in a discreet name. A regular payment to an initial L. You hear footsteps and do something your mother would faint over. You put everything back, lock the drawer, replace the key, and sit in Arthur's chair so you do not look like someone who makes mistakes. When the door opens, you have a letter in your hand that happens to be a menu for next Thursday. Arthur stops, takes you in, closes the door behind him. The room tightens. "Working?" he asks. "Learning," you say. "That is work," he says, "and you can't tell if it's praise." "I saw Catherine Remington," you add, "because lying to a husband is not something you intend to need daily practice at. She was kind." She would be. His jaw tightens minutely. The Remingtons enjoy being useful. "And you enjoy not owing anyone," you say softly. His eyes flicker. You have landed a needle. "We are going to Lady Duncliffe's tomorrow," he says after a pause, as if he is answering a question you didn't ask. "It will be your first time among people who will smile while evaluating your soul for resale value. Wear the pearls." He looks at the letter in your hand, as if it might turn into something else. "Shall I walk you back to your rooms? You want to tell him about Chelsea. You want to see his face make a decision. You want to ask what the letter L stands for and why it is making a hole in your fortune the size of a carriage door. But you are learning to schedule enemies. You are learning to calendar confrontations. Lady Sibley would approve. Please, you say, and he offers his arm. His sleeve is very fine. There is a faint smell of cigar smoke in the cloth that is not his. He looks straight ahead. You look at his profile and understand with the suddenness that makes truth sting. He was not taught to see his wife as someone who will know what he hides. You were not taught to forgive a husband who forgets your intelligence. You sleep badly. Your dreams are numbers that chase each other down staircases, and men with beautiful voices reading rules aloud while you try to breathe through laces and learn which fork will save you. Retention hook. Lady Duncliffe's rooms are where reputations are made and ruined in the length of a waltz. It's also where you will meet the first person who says the quiet part out loud. A room that eats the unprepared. The Duncliffe house is a chandelier that learned to walk. Music spills like champagne, and you cannot tell whether the people or the mirrors multiply faster. The room smells faintly of lilies, money, and expectation. Arthur's hand at your back is the precise pressure of ownership disguised as guidance. Courage, he murmurs, so softly you have to decide whether to count it as affection. The announcement floats. The Duke and Duchess of Ashbourne. The air shifts imperceptibly, the way water does when a ship passes. Faces turn. Expressions calibrate. You are a curiosity. American capital wrapped in English silk. A question asked publicly in a language people pretend not to speak. Lady Duncliffe approaches, trailing poets like a comet's tail. She is formidable because she has nothing left to prove and pays her bills in gossip. Ashbourne, she says, and beside her name your husband looks like a line that was always meant to be written. And the Duchess. We are all instructed to be charmed. Then it would be impolite to refuse, you say. Lady Sibley allowed you 3 jokes a night. That was one of them. Lady Duncliffe's eyes confess surprise before they remember to be delighted. Boston, she guesses. New York, you correct. Ah, she says, as if it explains both your dress and your posture. You will like my poets. They believe the world can be revised. English husbands find this alarming. She releases you into the current. You learn quickly. The first circle offers compliments designed to bruise. You convert them into acknowledgments that do not invite more. The second circle tests you with names. Who you know, what you've heard. You smile as if you are hiding secrets you haven't had time to steal. The third circle does not speak to you at all. They examine your thread count. You stand long enough for them to understand that thread count is not weather. A soprano begins to sing in Italian about something that must be love because everyone pretends to understand it. Arthur peels away to speak with a man whose mustache has never known a day of doubt. You are momentarily unmoored. Then James Remington materializes as if the room produced him to solve a problem. Your Grace, he says, you are surviving. Thriving, you correct, and he laughs softly. Good. The room eats the unprepared. It seems to find you. Underspiced. You discover that the easiest conversations are with people who assume you have nothing to offer. Surprise is a currency. You spend it sparingly. A painter asks what you think of the new gallery near Piccadilly. You say the frames are too smug for the canvases, and his eyes light as if he's found a sister in a shop where everything fits badly. A politician asks whether America will ever agree to be properly old. You say age is not a moral achievement. James chokes on his champagne. Then the quiet part. A woman in heliotrope silk whose diamonds could be used as doorstops approaches with a smile that has eaten girls for breakfast. She does not look at your face. She looks at your ring. My dear, she says in the tone that makes dear cost you. We are all so pleased you've made London your little project. You must find it satisfying to have rescued a house so how to put it, historically dignified. You feel Lady Sibley's training line up in your spine like soldiers. London rescued me from boredom, you say pleasantly. The house rescued my gardener from indolence. My husband rescued me from poets. I'm afraid there's very little of me left to be rescued. Heliotrope blinks. James smiles into his glass as if it's telling him jokes. The woman opens her mouth to deploy something barbed, but fate interrupts in the form of Lady Duncliffe's favorite poet, who begins reciting a verse about hunger and money that makes the room look rapidly for the exits. James leans closer just enough to count as advice. The woman in heliotrope is Lady Mowbray. Her husband lost heavily at Sandown. Her sympathy for other people's fortunes extends to the rim of her own glass. Is your gossip usually this nutritious? You ask. Only for friends, he says. You turn and find Arthur watching you, expression unreadable. He lifts his glass toward you in a small salute that says, "Well played." He crosses to Lady Mowbray and says something short that removes you from further attention. It occurs to you for the first time that Arthur can use his authority for you as well as on you. The thought complicates itself immediately by remembering Chelsea. During the interval, James arranges, without arranging, to bring you into a small circle near the French doors where the air is breathable. Catherine stands there, anchoring the conversation. A woman you haven't met yet, Emma Winchester of Chicago, appraises you openly and nods as if a tally has checked out. "Duchess," Emma says, "what do you do with your mornings?" "Learn not to drown," you say. "You?" "Teach men to swim," she replies, and offers her hand. The talk turns, not gossip, tactics. Catherine mentions a charity she supports, a school for girls whose fathers died at the docks. James says the Home Office is too busy to notice a small committee interfering in the workhouse rules. Emma says the trick with committees is to be boring in public and efficient in private. You say very little because your father taught you that. Silence is the pocket you keep your knives in. And then he arrives, not James. Arthur. But a different Arthur. He is not the man who handed you a schedule with a ring on your finger. He is a man who is amused by the fact that his wife can keep a small circle talking without looking for an exit. He stands beside you and does something dangerous. He places his hand lightly over yours where it rests on the back of a chair. A claim, a compliment, a recalibration. Lady Duncliffe announces a waltz. James bows out with a joke about the safety of poets' toes. Arthur doesn't ask. He simply invites and you accept, because refusing your husband in public is the sort of story that grows teeth. You waltz. You are not hopeless at it. He is excellent in the way men are when their mothers paid for proper training. There is a moment in the turn where you can see the entire room moving at once, the chandeliers, the dresses, the bets being made with eyes and smiles, and you realize the dance is not a diversion. It is a negotiation performed so beautifully people forget the stakes. You handled Mowbray, Arthur says, sotto voce. Efficiently. I prefer not to bleed where sharks can smell it, you reply. He almost smiles again. We may make a Londoner of you yet. Don't threaten me, you say lightly. When the music ends, he relinquishes you to applause that belongs to the musicians and to the room, which has decided you can stay, for now. On the way back to your corner, you pass a woman whose gown is simple, impeccable, and expensive in the way silence is expensive. Her eyes meet yours with an intimacy that ignores courtesy. She looks at your face as if she has seen it somewhere. Unlit. James appears at your elbow 5 minutes later. That, he says, was Lady Lucille Hart. You think of the ledgers. L. Chelsea. Your heart stumbles, recovers, pretends to have been dancing all along. She lives in Chelsea, he says, with rooms more tasteful than honest men can afford. Is she... You don't finish. because the room is full of sentences that will be overheard. She is what London becomes when it smiles with its teeth, James says softly. You should know her name. You should not learn her handwriting. You ride home in a carriage that feels like a courtroom. Arthur is quiet. The city outside fogs the windows with its own breath. Finally, he says, Duncliffe was productive. For whom, you ask? For us, he says. You were seen and approved. That is more expensive than any jewel and harder to steal. You think of a house in Chelsea that is purchasing something from you without asking you to sign a receipt. The number on the paper blooms again like a bruise you keep pressing. Arthur, you say, how much do you spend to keep the Ashbourne name comfortable? He turns his head slowly. Enough. Enough, you repeat. And how much is enough? He looks out the window. The carriage turns into Grosvenor Square. We will speak of numbers another day, he says. For now, sleep. You nod. You will sleep, and tomorrow you will count. You will count the rooms you preside over. You will count the secrets you have been assigned without consent. You will count the women who showed you how to count yourself. Retention hook. The garden party will bring you to the Queen. But the next morning will bring you to a locked drawer and a bruising truth with a single initial. The Queen who notices. Everything, by dawn, the house sounds like a regiment moving under orders. Pipes hammer, boots cross stone, doors practice discretion. Stevens and 2 other maids orbit you like purposeful moths, steam rising from the wash, as if London is lending you its breath. The dress, cream silk, embroidery so fine you suspect elves paid with eyesight, descends over you as carefully as a treaty. Pearls at the ear, at the throat, the modest gleam of surrender. Lady Sibley arrives without knocking because permission is something she dispenses, not requests. Turn, she says, and you obey. She snips an invisible thread from a cuff. You will be discussed. That cannot be helped. The objective is to let them discuss what you choose. What do I choose it, you ask? To be inevitable, she says simply. No one resents the weather. They only plan around it. The carriage waits with the quiet arrogance of good horses. Arthur, flawless in morning dress, hatred of error polished to a shine, offers his hand and says, Do you remember everything? I've forgotten enough that the rest will not look memorized, you say. He almost smiles. Good. Buckingham's lawns explode with color and control. Tents like shell caps, servants like chess pieces, women in a bouquet of silks that look grown rather than sewn, men folded into black and gray like disciplined shadows. The air smells of grass and judgment. An orchestra plays something that even the wind cannot interrupt. You spot Catherine across a spill of guests. Her glance is a hand squeezed in a crowd. You nod, the smallest of signals, and it is astonishing how much ballast it provides. Stay. Left, Arthur murmurs. The line will form near the terrace. There is a rhythm to it all, like tides that learned manners. People flow toward a cordoned space that is not a throne and somehow is. The murmur modulates, its vowels rounding, its consonants fingering gloves, until it quiets of its own accord. Then you see her, small in black, the famous bulldog jaw rendered as authority rather than stubbornness, eyes that serve as both, magnifying glass and lint brush. Queen Victoria walks as if she invented forward. The line shortens. At some point, your ribs decide they do not need air. Lady Sibley's voice, remembered rather than heard, says, Honor, do not collapse. Arthur bows. You dip. The world narrows to a point where your eyes remain lowered, and the entire British Empire is a pair of sensible shoes. Your Majesty, Arthur says, may I present my wife, Evelyn, Duchess of Ashbourne. You rise. Her eyes are the blue of someone who knows exactly how much ink costs. They travel from your pearls to your hands to your face and settle on that last with a curiosity you were warned not to confuse with affection. "American," she says, not unkindly, as if confirming the provenance of a fine horse. "Yes, ma'am." "From New York." "Yes, ma'am." She studies you as though you are attempting an equation she has solved many times. "We have had Americans at court, Vanderbilt, Churchill. They bring a certain electricity. England benefits from efficient currents. There is a twinkle in efficient that your mother would die to see and your father would tattoo on a ledger. I hope to conduct well, ma'am," you say, managing a smile that gives nothing away and promises everything. Her mouth pinches as if she is suppressing something indecorous. Amusement. "Conduct, yes. Ashbourne," she slices Arthur a glance that could weather stone, "will see you taught what is necessary. You, Duchess, will determine what is useful. I will try not to confuse the two, ma'am. See that you do." "Not," she says, "and the dismissal is a gift. You have been seen and not entirely disapproved. You step back the requisite number of paces, a dance done at the altar of sovereignty." Arthur's breath leaves him in something like relief. "She was alive, you say? In there behind the photographs." You can feel Lady Sibley's approval land on your shoulder from 50 yards away like a bird not yet tamed. What follows is a strange victory parade in slow motion. People who yesterday graded you like homework now tilt in your direction. Lady Mowbray curtsies from the neck, her heliotrope dimmed by daylight. The Duchess of Devonshire asks about a string. Quartet as if the world is made of small choices that indicate large natures. A minister's wife invites you to something called a garden reading, as though that phrase isn't one stumble away from revolution. James appears like a necessary coincidence. His bow is proper. The glint in his eyes is not. Her Majesty looked at you long enough to start a rumor. "About my shoes, you say? About your spine," he says. "Some women bring lace to court. You brought architecture. Arthur will be thrilled to have me mistaken for a building," you reply, and are saved from smiling too widely by Arthur himself, who drifts into position between you and James with the grace of a well-bred blockade. "The Countess of Pembroke asks for you," he says to you and to James. "Your brother's horse will break before Ascot if he continues to run him like a criminal." "Then he'll finally have something in common with our bloodlines," James says cheerfully. "Good day, Ashbourne." Arthur steers you onward, a general with a valuable ally who insists on having opinions. You perform. You are gracious, not grateful. Present, not performative. Brief, not brusque. The compliments wash, the introductions sting less. The rooms inside you begin to learn where to stack these new boxes. For a moment, London feels like a puzzle and not a trap. And yet, a current runs under the day you can't pretend is only water. Twice you catch, at the edge of the throng, the simple, perfect silhouette of Lady Lucille Hart, the kind of elegance money discovers after it's done trying too hard. James's voice ghosts your ear from last night. You should know her name. You should not learn her handwriting. She does not approach you. She does not need to. She glances once. Just once, a passerby's interest lengthened half a second, and then she is gone, the way a rumor leaves the room just before someone opens their mouth. By the time you are in the carriage home, your body is a long bow unstrung. Arthur sits angled, thoughtful. She was impressed, he says. That is not common. She ignores many things, you say. It must be restful. He huffs a laugh. We will be invited where we were not. That matters. To whom you do not ask. Instead, as the carriage turns, you watch London's brick and soot soften to the brown of a well-used book. The house greets you with polished restraint. Lady Sibley is waiting with the look of a teacher who refuses to celebrate until the exam. Results arrive. You did not faint, she says, nor commit treason. You did not fawn, nor glare. She inclines her head a millimeter. From Lady Sibley, that is a parade. Alone, finally, in the quiet that follows triumphs, you take out the folded bank statement and lay it on your dressing table like an object that might explode if jostled. The figure sits there, innocent as a child repeating a bad word it does not understand. You think of the Queen's eyes, the way they caught ideas and weighed their metal. You think of Arthur, approval and secrecy threading his voice into a net. You think of Catherine's room where women did not ask permission to be intelligent. You sit very still. Then you pull the bell and ask Stevens, without dressing it in coyness, "Do you know who sends flowers here from Chelsea?" Stevens's pause is not hesitation, it is calculation. Occasionally, Your Grace, a spray of lilies arrives without card. Mr. Pierce says they are for the morning room. They have a smell some would call pure. Lily, you say. Lucille. L. Your mouth tastes like you swallowed a petal and it cut. Shall I have them redirected? Stevens asks. No, you say. I should like to see what chooses itself. When Stevens leaves, you refold the paper. Tuck it into the sewing box Lady Sibley considers your most ladylike possession, and set a date with yourself. Tomorrow you will visit the study as if you have always done so. You will find the ledgers. You will count. Hook. The drawer yields numbers. The numbers yield a name, and the name will insist on being met in person. The drawer that tells the truth. You choose the hour when houses begin pretending to be empty. Mid-afternoon. Staff retreat into the walls. Callers nap away their determination. Pierce allows his eyebrow to lift just enough to indicate he has noticed. Your direction. Mrs. Wilkes recalibrates a dusting itinerary by an inch. You pass both with the serenity of someone who belongs everywhere. Arthur's study smells like leather, and a grandfather's library that learned to disapprove. You close the door the way he does, without letting the latch complain. The key is where memory keeps it. The drawer opens as if you have earned the right. Ledgers are unromantic lovers, demanding, precise, punishing for neglect. You lay them out and do what your father taught you. Read columns as sentences, dates as tone. The first book tells a story with a happy beginning. Your wedding week slashed through with repayments, mortgages killed humanely, debts escorted off the premises like unwanted relatives. The relief is visible. The ink itself breathes easier. The second book tells what relief does to men who think they've been saved for free. Paper thins where it has been touched most. Racing stakes, gentlemen's debts collected with a smile and paid with your father's money, investments with the shelf life of milk, a Chelsea lease in a name that is not a name, L. Hart, with a monthly retainer and the occasional indecently expensive gift disguised as something charitable. The losses at Sandown and Goodwood stack like tin soldiers knocked down by someone who should not have been playing. You feel something that is not anger and not grief. It is recognition, not of Arthur precisely, but of a system that feeds men the illusion of consequence-free appetite and calls it heritage. You turn a page and find a hand that is not Arthur's. A neat accountant's script, note at the margin. Discuss withdrawals with His Grace. It is old. It is not followed up. Whoever wrote it chose employment over conscience. You make a mental note of the signature, G. Bennett, a name that pricks more strongly because Catherine once said, offhand, as if pointing the way to a bakery, "If ever you need a solicitor who cares more for women than the men who pay them, ask for Bennett near Lincoln's Inn Fields." You copy 3 lines onto a small card, figures, dates, the Chelsea ledger, and slide the card into your glove. When you close the drawer, you do not lock it immediately. You sit in Arthur's chair, touch the desk as if it might be hot, and force yourself to feel the full shape of the problem, not just its sharp edge. You will not be the woman who rages efficiently and plans badly. You will be the woman who rages quietly and plans like a bank. The house murmurs. A cart clatters on. The street. Somewhere a clock betrays time. You stand, you lock the drawer, you restore Plutarch to his dutiful camouflage. You straighten a paper that probably does not need straightening. Then you ring for Pierce. "Would you have Miss Fortescue bring me the household ledger?" you ask when he appears, as if this is the most natural request in the world. "We'll review menus and coal before dinner." "Of course, Your Grace," he says, and if he notices that your face has become the kind of stillness men call frightening when they mean unstoppable, he chooses his job over the observation. Miss Fortescue arrives with a ledger that is honest and mundane. Carrots, candles, coal by the ton, bread, wages, the arithmetic of a house behaving responsibly. The relief is small and clean. It reminds you what competence looks like in ink. "If we reduce lilies, no one will die," you say. "If we increase lamp oil by a fraction, fewer letters will be written in bad temper." Miss Fortescue's lips twitch. Her Grace innovates. Her Grace turns rooms into friends, you correct, and line items obey. At 3, you send a note to Catherine and receive, by 4, a card with a time and an address written casually enough to fool anyone. Who does not understand rescue requires discretion. At 5, you don a hat that looks like shopping. At 5:10, you leave by the Mews entrance because your life has begun to require doors that flatter none of the men in it. Catherine's drawing room is a different place when there are only 2 of you. It exhales. She takes one look at your face and says, "Oh!" "Chelsea," you say, and place the copied figures on the tea tray as if you are serving refreshment. She reads. She does not ask how you acquired them. "Bennett," she says, "I'll send for him. You'll decide what you want before he arrives, otherwise he'll decide for you in the kindest way and you'll forgive him for it and then hate him for weeks." What are my options? Secure assets in your name. Establish an account with your father's bank's correspondent here. Build a trust for any child you may be bribed by God into bearing, with terms that keep Arthur from hunting. Arrange a safe deposit for jewelry. Begin to pay 3 servants as if they were 3 walls. "Which 3? "Your maid," she says promptly. "The butler, the housekeeper, if she's yours and not his mother's legacy." "Mrs. Wilkes," you say. "She would stand in front of a fire and negotiate with it." "Good," Catherine says. "Bribe is an ugly word. We prefer compensate for loyalty." "And Chelsea?" Catherine's face does something rare. It softens toward contempt. "You do not fight a fire by beating it with your hands. You remove the oil. You can confront her if you must, but never without protection and never without purpose. She will not be ashamed. Shame is for people who value the same court you just triumphed in. She values a different court. I want not to be stolen from with my own consent," you say. "Then do not consent. You do not need to announce your refusal for it to be effective." Bennett arrives as if he has been waiting at the corner all afternoon. He is younger than the title necessary usually allows, neat as fresh law, spectacles that do not apologize for existing. He bows to you as though he is greeting a client, not a cause. Bless him for that. You tell him what you can without confessing what would endanger servants. He asks excellent questions and writes answers as if paper is a seedbed. He suggests, never presses, and somehow you find you have agreed to precisely the things you wanted. An account connected to your father's bank through a correspondent, a trust structure that will age into iron, a safe deposit at a bank where no one pronounces, your title as if it excuses arithmetic. Papers that, when signed, will reduce Arthur's fascination with the track from ruinous to merely stupid. "Your Grace," he says, "this next fortnight is delicate. We will schedule transfers small enough not to invite attention, frequent Enough to matter. Keep your routines. Allow your husband nothing to notice except your competence. And if he notices anyway, then we hope he has more pride than temper, Bennett says. Pride can be reasoned with. You sign. Catherine witnesses like a priest at a wedding that will, this time, save a life. Bennett leaves, his efficiency and armor you are almost superstitious about admiring. Friday, Catherine says, as the clock peals 6. We'll call it sewing. You can bring your mask and your real face. We accept both. On your way home, the city wears its evening kindness. Softer edges, lamplight practicing to be stars. You watch faces in windows and remember the American. Trick of deciding your life rather than inheriting it. The house receives you. Stevens begins the liturgy of removal. Pins, pearls, silk's quiet sigh. You lay in bed and count, not sheep, not steps, but days until your account will be an island no one can flood. You sleep as if someone kept watch. In a way, someone did. Hook. Edward can ignore many things. Bankers are not one of them. When the telegram arrives, the marriage learns what it costs to become a partnership by force. Terms written in ink and in rooms. The telegram is the sound of a plate dropped in a dining room. Everyone pretends not to hear, but forks go quiet. It arrives at noon, while you are inspecting the household linen with Mrs. Wilkes, who approves of your method for testing fabric with fingertips instead of adjectives. Pierce brings the yellow slip with a neutrality monarchs would envy. For His Grace, he says, placing it beside the silver tally. Shall I see it delivery? You ask, the coupe of cordial cool. He instructed all wires be brought to him or to you if he is out, Pierce says, adding in a glancing afterthought. That could save a city. He is out. You read it because to do otherwise would be to pretend you can afford not to. The banker writes short and bleak. Unusual transfer patterns. Stop kindly advise. Stop urgent. You fold the paper once and deliver it to the envelope tray as if it belongs to your afternoon and not your arteries. Then you finish with Mrs. Wilkes, who has the tact not to notice that linen is now theater scenery for a different play. She laughs, and it is not unkind. Very well, you have my respect. I will not insult you with flowers. And third, you say, leaning in because this is where Lady Sibley would tell you to module 8, and James would tell you to sharpen. And Catherine would tell you to choose yourself. If you must choose a duke to ruin this season, choose another. She appraises you the way jewelers look at stones they cannot afford. You are not sentimental. I am practical, you say. Sentiment is expensive when misapplied. She tilts her head. Do you love him? You do not sell to my heart, you say. I am not in your marketplace. Ah, she says pleased. You do not answer questions you did not intend to. That will keep you alive. She sips, places the cup with a person's grace, not a lady's. In another life, we conduct a business together. In this one, you say, we do not conduct any business at all. She considers the word any like a bite of very dark chocolate. You are new. That helps. Men can be surprised by newness. She sets her cup down. Very well. I accept your terms. Retainer to end, lilies to the river. A note to your husband framed as a woman exchanging a luxury for a more interesting variety. She stands. You stand. You will lose sleep, she says finally. Not because of me, because of the game. Do not make that loss retroactive by imagining sins I did not commit. I am honest in my trade. I believe you, you say, because you do. And one more piece of charity, she adds. Do not mistake the Queen's curiosity for armor. Aristocracy enjoys observing fires. It does not always extinguish them. Thank you, you say, and mean it, and watch the surprise register because she does not expect thanks and is therefore not immune to it. Outside, The city smells like river metal and someone else's bread. You feel lightheaded the way you do after a perfect curtsy. Knees intact, dignity intact, nothing on fire. You think of Arthur, whether he will take this as an insult to his masculinity or as a removal of costly furniture from a room he wishes to open a window in. You think of James, of the joke he will make to deflect the importance of the information he will get by asking nothing. You think of Catherine, tea poured like permission. You think of Lady Sibley, who will say only, "Good," and make you practice not looking triumphant. You ride home backwards because superstition is a kind of spine. When you step through your own door, you are met not by Pierce, not by Mrs. Wilkes, not by Stevens, but by Arthur, who, despite the hour, is home. "How was Chelsea?" he asks. And the way he says Chelsea is not accusation. It is the professional interest of a man taking inventory of a stable. Profitable, you say. At no cost to our tenants. He nods once. He has never looked more himself or less like the man in the portrait hall who believes his chin invented duty. "I received a note," he says. "She is very modern." "She is very honest," you say. He grimaces. "That in this city is modern." You both stand a measured distance apart, as if you have drawn chalk lines you now elect not to. Cross. The house breathes around you. A footman passes with the invisible weight of discretion in his hands. Somewhere a hothouse door clicks. The portrait of the late Duchess refuses to blink. Arthur clears his throat. "We have an invitation," he says, "to Chadsworth, next month." "The Devonshires," you say. Your father spoke of their view as if it were a moral achievement. "It may as well be," he says. "Would you like to preside over a weekend in a house old enough to have opinions of its own?" "I would like to preside over anything that has opinions," you say. "I am accustomed to them." He almost smiles. Then he doesn't. "There's something else." He reaches into his coat and removes a folded piece of paper. For a second, you imagine another invoice, another betrayal, another chapter in a book that refuses to end on a page you like. It is none of those. It is a note, scrawled, hurried, signed G. Bennett. Transfers complete, trust constituted, safe deposit secured, caution for 48 hours recommended, then proceed as if the house is yours. "It isn't addressed to me," Arthur says. "It was delivered to my hand," you say, because accuracy is a doctrine now. "Then it is yours," he says, and that sentence, so simple, so insufficient, and so astonishing, is the first time he has spoken like a partner rather than a proprietor. You nod. "Good. Then I will spend the next 2 days pretending to be exactly what they think I am." "And after?" he asks. "After," you say, "we will be what we have decided." This is not love. It is not even friendship. It is the kind of Treaty 2 nations sign when they both learned during winter that pride does not keep soup hot. You take it. You are a nation now, with boundaries and tariffs and a coast you intend to defend. In your rooms, Stevens brushes your hair, counting, pins like a general counting his dead so he can write letters to their mothers. "You look taller," she says, which is not a thing hair can do and exactly the thing victory does. "What did you do today?" she adds, as if asking what color the weather was. "I went shopping," you say, and allow yourself a smile that only this mirror will ever see. Country air, old marble, new eyes. At Chadsworth you will meet the part of England that pretends not to be a stage, and still is. There, one mistake could echo for years. There, one choice will finally make this your life. Chadsworth. Where the stone has opinions, country houses announce themselves long before your carriage touches gravel. First it's the trees, older than most mistakes, arranging their branches into sermons about permanence. Then the approach, a mile of lesson in proportion, where the grass is shaved like a soldier, and the sheep pretend to be expensive. Clouds. Finally the house, Chadsworth, an argument in limestone that refuses to end. It doesn't loom, it presides. Windows like thoughtful eyes, a sweep of steps broad enough to teach an army how to enter without apologizing. You feel the same sensation you had before the Queen. Not fear, exactly, but the awareness that you are about to be measured by a ruler that has outlived centuries of hands. Arthur is unusually silent on the final turn. He watches the facade, the way navigators watch shorelines, mapping wind against hazard. "Remember," he says, straightening his gloves into obedience, "Chadsworth has a memory. Be interesting in ways it likes. Timely, domestic, charitable, and never theatrical, you say. Lady Sibley's litany has become second nature. You could recite it while dodging a toppling chandelier." "Exactly," he murmurs, and offers you out as if he's presenting good news to a difficult board. The Duchess of Devonshire, tall, burnished, the kind of woman who makes the phrase country seat sound like an honor bestowed upon a throne, receives you herself. "Ashbourne, and the American Duchess," she says, voice warm enough to be generous and cool enough to be valuable. "We are charmed you could escape London's heat and acquire ours. Your Grace," you curtsy. "We've been eager to discover whether the Chadsworth lawns are, as rumored, greener than the Queen's." "They are opinionated," she replies, amused. "Come, luncheon first, introductions after. One is always kinder when fed." Inside, history ceases to be a hallway of portraits and becomes an organism. The staircase is a spine, the rooms are lungs that fill with gossip then exhale music. Guides are unnecessary. The house itself knows where you're going. You pass pastels that remember trickier summers, sculpture that learned shame and taught it back to humans, tables that have held treaties disguised as desserts. Luncheon is in the green dining room because of course it is. 20 at table, the precise number at which conversation can travel without getting lost. You are placed diagonally opposite the hostess, not too near to flatter, not too far to forget, with Arthur at a respectable remove. To your left, Lady Agatha Braithwaite, who wears her inheritance like an armored shawl. To your right, Mr. Lionel Poynter, a scholar of Roman roads whose hair has not kept pace with his enthusiasm. Across from you, the Earl of Whitmarsh, who looks like a sailing ship that learned English. Next to him, a woman the room tilts toward without realizing, Lady Helena Winters. Yes, that Winters. James's sister-in-law, Baltimore-born reputation. For intelligence whispered the way some people whisper confession. You place your napkin, lift your glass, and locate the current. Country talk, then politics as weather, then horses as theology. You can do this. You have done this. Drawing rooms in Mayfair are rehearsal rooms for this exact performance. You ask Mr. Poynter whether Romans measured their miles with vanity or with sense. He lights up like a candelabrum discovering electricity. You give Lady Agatha exactly enough silence to hang herself with her opinion of Americans, and then rescue her with a question about the harvest. She will not thank you, and therefore she will owe you. And when Lady Helena catches your eye, you find in her gaze the thing you have learned to prize almost more than admiration, recognition. We are both imports, her look says. We learned to bloom in a climate that prefers its flowers native. You feel taller without moving. James arrives late in the way people arrive who know they can afford it socially, even if they cannot financially. A gust of apology wrapped in charm. He gives the hostess a smile that a lesser woman would keep. Bows to you in the way a brother-in-law bows to someone he wants on the right team, and takes a seat 2 down from Arthur as if to demonstrate he can be both near and innocuous. He catches your eye for a flicker. Not tonight, his glance promises. Tonight you are building an audience, not a story. After luncheon, the house expands into activities the way a hand opens into usefulness. Men to the gun room to argue trajectory. ladies to the orangery to hate each other flatteringly and exchange information disguised as citrus admiration. You cannot hide among the oranges. Emma Winchester materializes like a conspirator with perfect timing. You've met Helena, she says. Good. She's a brain with excellent tailoring. Her reputation precedes her, you say. Which is rare for the truth. Emma's grin is quick and private. How are you holding up? Like a column that knows the roof depends on it, you murmur. Perfect, she says. Columns do not gossip. Lady Devonshire appears at your elbow. Duchess, would you walk? The south lawn is making a case for itself. Outside, the sunlight pulls discipline out of the gardens until even the hedges look informal. You walk at the hostess's pace, not hurry, not dawdle, and wait to see which subject the house will choose to hear. I had reservations, she says without embroidery, about imported duchesses. I grew up on stories of girls who arrived with money and left with opinions. I have arrived with both, you say lightly, and am trying to leave with neither scattered. This is humor with a function. She accepts it as payment and proceeds. Arthur has been trying. We attribute it to a recent possession by a good angel. I have been accused of worse hauntings, you reply. The truth is not flattery. Since the telegram, since the treaty, Arthur has been, if not altered, then calibrated. Less wine, fewer afternoons that vanish into a particular river quarter, more time in the study with ledgers that now know your shadow as well. He needs a partner, the Duchess says. By temperament he likes command, by circumstance he requires counsel. If you provide both without announcing either, the county will bless you with crops. And if I fail? Then Chadsworth will remember, she says, and smiles to soften the threat into a proverb. You pass a ha-ha disguised as inevitability, and beyond it, a view so composed it insists on being painted. Tenants' cottages are tucked just so between stands of beach. A mill wheel turns with narrative satisfaction. Far fields stripe themselves in harvest grammar, and there, a blot of motion that doesn't belong. A boy running toward you, hat errant, knees narrating speed, a housemaid dogging him with the futility of someone trying to catch weather. The boy barrels to a halt 3 yards off when he recognizes the amount of silk involved. He bows in a hurry that nearly becomes a fall. Beg pardon, your graces, he pants. There's a thing at Lower Farm. Mr. Fenn says it's bad. Which thing? Lady Devonshire asks, already turning. The gear, he huffs. The threshing gear, surged and caught Tom's arm, and the belt won't slip, and you do not think. You were raised in a country where machines are not metaphors. Where? You ask, and when he points, you are already moving. You run, and do not care that a duchess is not supposed to. Skirts up, corset protesting, heart punching your ribs for negligence. You hear Lady Devonshire call for her bailiff. You hear Emma Winchester's practical oath. You hear your own name in Arthur's voice, not prohibiting but warning, and you file it for later. There are moments when rank is a tool and moments when it is ballast. This is a tool moment. Lower Farm's threshing shed is a cathedral of wood and panic. The machine squats in the center, bristling and righteous, belt a black tongue snarling toward the spindle. A boy, Tom, stands white-lipped, left sleeve a nightmare of linen and red. Men are trying to help the way men try when the thing they love, a machine that makes them wealthy, is doing something horrible, reminding them it can choose. Back, you say with a voice you didn't know you own. Give it air. They obey without asking why. Authority is sometimes just the absence of doubt. You step to the belt, watch the jitter, listen to the engine's rhythm like a doctor listens to a heart. Where's the wedge? You ask. Blank looks. There should be a wooden wedge near the pulley to throw the belt if she runs. A boy produces, from nowhere obeying you better than he obeys his mother. A triangular block built for precisely this mercy. Arthur. you say, and he is there, coat off, willing to be muscle when you require it. Hold his shoulders. Tom, look at me. I need your eyes. The boy drags his gaze from his own blood to your face, like a drowning man choosing a rope. You will count, you say. 3. And then scream as loud as you can. That's my signal. Are you brave enough to terrify every sparrow on this farm? He nods, tears meddling his cheeks. 1, you say, placing the wedge where it needs to. B. 2, you breathe, fingers on the belt that feels like a horse about to misbehave. 3, he screams, a sound that cuts the roof from the world. Men flinch, birds erupt. You jam the wedge into the pulley's kiss and the belt leaps. Like a struck serpent, off, away, slapping the earth with a rage that has nothing to bite. The machine sighs into stillness like a monster after its story has been told. Silence. Then the room exhales all at once, and the floor is chaos again. But better chaos. Arthur has Tom gathered against him. The bailiff arrives with bandages and whiskey. Lady Devonshire appears, all command and hands and prayer. You take one step back, then another, until the world is far enough away to let your body remember shaking. Emma's arm is suddenly around your waist in a circle that knows what it means to stand and shake anyway. Later, what a word. Later. You are in the small parlor off the South Hall, drinking something that pretends to be tea and is probably brandy in costume. The men have taken Tom to the cottage. The doctor is on his way. The mill wheel still turns because the world is cruel and practical in equal measure. Where did you learn that? The Duchess asks without preface, meaning the wedge, the voice, the refusal to stay decorative. New York, you say. My father invested in a mill on the Hudson. He liked to bring his daughters to see where our money learned to work. One winter, the belt took a man's hand because someone had hung a coat too close to the gear. And my father swore I'd never be helpless in a room with a machine again. Your father sounds like a villain to men who prefer women to faint, Emma says, admiration carving her mouth into a smile. I like him immediately. Arthur says nothing. He looks at you like a man who has been surviving on bread and just remembered. Soup exists. You do not look back long enough to drown. Chadsworth, as predicted, remembers. That evening, when the house is put together again and the candles repeat civilization, you become a subject. Not gossip, not merely, but narrative. You saved a boy's arm, perhaps. You refused to be beautiful when useful was required, certainly. You did not grandstand, miraculously. You are told to your face that you were extraordinary and behind your back that you were American, said not as a slur but as a species classification that has suddenly upgraded from nuisance to necessary. James finds you near a fireplace that has warmed kings and criminals impartially. He keeps his voice low, as if humor would bruise the air. You do realize you've just ruined the next 3 country weekends for every other duchess. They can return the favor by teaching me to ride a side saddle without believing in saints, you say. His smile is soft and unpracticed. You've changed the room, he says simply. Even the portraits are looking over their frames. Help. Me not to fall off the shelf, you say. It is the closest you will come to asking him for anything. Gladly, he replies, and steps back. The cleverest kind of help. Arthur approaches, as if he has rehearsed not being awkward, and failed, charmingly. The doctor says Tom will keep the arm, he reports. Relief makes him younger by 5 years. He also says you prevented a death today. I prefer that kind of housekeeping, you say. He inhales. Thank you. The 2 words sit between. You like a new piece of furniture you're not yet sure the room deserves. You nod, not magnanimous, not coy, accepting gratitude as a fact rather than a ribbon. Later, candles landed, wine poured, the house drifting into that hour when laughter loosens names from titles. Lady Devonshire proposes cards. You play. a hand of whist so carefully it looks careless. Lady Agatha loses with bad grace. Mr. Pointer miscounts Roman numerals and blames Caesar. You laugh, the kind that removes armor without promising surrender. In your room, Stevens undoes the day from your hair with the reverence of a priest folding vestments. We heard, she says, pins clicking like punctuation. Mr. Pierce said the South Hall cheered when you came back. I did a practical thing in a practical building, you say. You did a brave thing in a place that will keep score, she replies, and lays the last curl down like a secret. When the house finally lies, when even the stone stops remembering. Aloud, you stand at the window and look over lawns that have judged better women than you. Somewhere beyond the trees, a boy sleeps with his arm accounted for. Somewhere in this house, your husband, your negotiated partner, is awake considering a future in which your competence is not a threat but a resource. Somewhere down the corridor, Helena Winters is writing a letter to a woman in Baltimore that begins, "There is a duchess here who whistles belts off demons." And somewhere in London, a lily goes unsent. You thought Chadsworth would be a test. It became an answer, not final, not fixed, but firm enough to build on. You are not here to be a story. You are here to write one. Court presentation looms, silk, ostrich plumes, and a curtsy engineered like a bridge. But court is not the danger. A supper afterward is. There, one remark sharp as a stiletto will force you to choose between the safety of silence and the cost of truth. Plumes, powder, and the price of an answer court mornings begin before the sun admits guilt. The house wakes with a different kind of noise. Hushed, efficient, the way a theater sounds when carpenters are trusting their hands more than their sleep. The presentation dress lies across the chaise like a snowdrift that learned manners. White satin, a train long enough to have opinions, embroidery so pale it is visible only to people who deserve it. 3 ostrich plumes wait in their box like tamed weather. Lady Sibley oversees with the fervor of a bishop for whom salvation is posture. Remember, she says, securing the first plume so that it nods and not wobbles, the curtsy is architecture, not acrobatics. Lower through the knees. Keep the spine a column. The head yields last. And if I fall? You ask, because jokes are how Americans breathe in crowded rooms. Then you will rise with dignity and claim it was a demonstration, she says, not smiling, already moving to the train. Grip with these 2 fingers. Do not let it argue. Stevens and a junior maid choreograph around you with pins like prayers. The white kid gloves slide on with a soft hiss, purity as costume. The diamonds Arthur insists upon at your throat are the loudest thing you will wear. You allow yourself one quiet thought, steady as a needle. You will not become porcelain today. You will be steel that learned to shine. The carriage is a pelmet of lace and nerves. Arthur sits opposite in morning dress that seems to have picked him for the day. He's careful with his silence. It doesn't crowd you. At St. James's, the line of coaches piles up like history waiting its turn. Outside, London does its best impression of Rome. Columns, courtyards, men with lists whose pens are sharper than swords. Inside, women bloom and whisper and mask their terror in satin. Feathers bob, fans flicker. Occasionally, someone remembers to breathe. Your name is spoken into the air by a gentleman who looks like he ate a book of rules and found it nourishing. You are announced. You cross. The presence chamber receives you, and then the next room swallows even that grandeur. The floor gleams with expectation. The courtier's eyes are polished. This is theater, yes, but not all plays are pretend. You measure your steps, counting to avoid thinking 1, 2, 3, stop, train gripped, turn, sink. The curtsy lengthens the way promises do when kept in public. Knee to knee, heel flat, back a story about trees that refuse storms. The plumes dip. The diamonds do not clatter. The train behaves. You rise slowly, the way a decision rises in a room and men pretend they thought of it first. Her Majesty is smaller than her paintings and larger than her century. The eyes do the work. They pin, they weigh, they nod, the kind of nod that stamps filed on a person. "Duchess," she says. "Last week in the garden she called you American. Today she uses the title you earned with performance rather than purchase. It is the kindest sort of precision." "Ma'am," you answer. She glances at the plumes, the train, then your hands. "Practical fingers," she says, perhaps to herself, perhaps to you, perhaps to the idea of you written against the wall. "You train them, ma'am," you reply, "and they consent to be decorative." The corner of her mouth is not a smile. It is a sovereign remembering that she, too, has hands. You are moved, along by the current that carries all things, even queens, toward precedent. The corridor releases you into the warm chaos beyond court. Ladies counting pins rescued, men pretending they do not admire their own restraint, footmen performing miracles with a staircase and 20 yards of fabric. Arthur meets you just past. The choke point, eyes bright with relief that you did not invent a new story about Americans and tripping. "You were," he begins. "Upright," you say. "I plan to keep the habit." He laughs, brief and not borrowed from anyone else. "There is a supper at Pembroke House this evening. Small, intimate." He says intimate like an ambush. Lady Pembroke collects adjectives, you say. She arranges them to flatter her lighting. "Bring your best diplomacy," he answers, "and my second best patience." "Save the first for me," he says dryly, but the edge is dulled now. He is learning where your humor carries a blade and where it carries a handkerchief. The day disassembles itself into rest and repairs, plumes boxed, train examined for injuries like a soldier. Lady Sibley pronounces your curtsy acceptable, with notes. Stevens unhooks you from the idea of perfection and rehooks you into the idea of supper. Pembroke House glows. Not the raw blaze of new money, the banked fire of ancient social tricks, light on cheekbones, shadow on chins, mirrors where laughter looks expensive. The Countess of Pembroke receives at the top of the stairs with the smile of a woman who has forgiven everyone only because it gives her leverage. The guest list is surgical. A cabinet undersecretary who leaks with taste, 2 duchesses who are generous with the right kind of gossip, Lord Braithwaite, Agatha's husband, whose charity to horses does not extend to humans, Helena Winters, eyes amused, Emma Winchester, eyes armed, James, because the room is better when people watch him watch it. You take in the dialects, county, club, court, and choose where to listen first. James presents his bow like a shield he keeps for you. "Congratulations," he murmurs. "The court survived you." "It will recover," you reply. "We brought smelling salts and precedent." "Save some explosives for supper," he says, "but don't light them near the fish." Dinner is a narrow river of courses in porcelain, boats, talk skims and occasionally dives. You place yourself in the current, say nothing dangerous, say nothing dull. Lord Pembroke opines that steam will be the death of civilization because it permits the wrong sort of person to arrive on time. Helena counters that civilization may survive punctuality if it survives aristocrats who are late on principle. The room appreciates the humor without admitting why. And then it happens. The remark that slides under the ribs because it pretends to be velvet. It comes from Lady Agatha herself, pearls prim as prejudice. She folds her napkin, looks down the table to you with the benevolence usually reserved for problematic nieces, and says, "I suppose in America they prepare girls at, what do you call them, factories. Very useful when one must leap to the rescue of machinery. Quite thrilling at luncheon, I'm sure." There it is, a stiletto dipped in civility. You feel it touch the old bruise. The one labeled perform don't exist. The room tilts the way. Rooms do when everyone leans in and no one moves. You could laugh it away. You could ignore it and bleed later in private. Or you could pay the cost now, truth wrapped to pass inspection. You choose the debt you can afford. You set your fork down. You meet Agatha's eyes not as a challenger, not as a supplicant, simply as a woman who has decided to be a person tonight. In America, you say, voice calm enough to make quiet, contagious. Some girls are indeed prepared by factories, and some by rooms like this one. The difference is that the former teaches a girl that a belt will take an arm if you flatter it. The latter sometimes teaches a girl that collapse is elegant. I am grateful to have learned both kinds of lessons. They saved different lives. Silence, the expensive kind. Then Helena, bless her Baltimore, lets a breath out that sounds like a new idea being applauded. Emma's fan stills. The cabinet undersecretary laughs once, short, surprised, as if someone just translated for him a language he thought he knew. James does nothing, which is the most useful thing. Stillness makes a space for the sentence to land. Lord Braithwaite clears his throat with the authority of a man who thinks noise restores hierarchy. A lady's strength, he declares, is in her gentleness. A lady's strength, you reply without looking away from Agatha, is in using what she has to keep people from dying for someone else's mistake. Arthur shifts beside you, a movement not of restraint, but of recognition. Pembroke's butler chooses that moment, the oldest skill in his trade, to advance with a sauce that needs attention. Plates are exchanged. Conversation remembers how to walk without limping. Agatha smiles, which on her face looks like lace on a cannon. Charming, she says, which is the word people use when they are wrong and need cover. After dinner, the drawing room receives the women like an obedient lake. Tea considers itself. Cards shuffle. Whispers braid. You are intercepted by the hostess, who rests a hand on your sleeve with the intimate gravity of someone who would prefer not to apologize publicly. My dear, Lady Pembroke says, meaning I own the ceiling, Lady Agatha can be... Agatha, you say pleasantly, has never had to wedge a belt off a pulley. It is a shame to be deprived of such, she searches, practical romance. Romance is a different room, you say. Today we were in the shed. She studies you and decides you've provided enough to be managed. Your answer was tidy, she concedes. Men enjoy tidy truths. They feel less indicted. Then I'll let the messier ones ripen, you say. Helena materializes, eyes alight. That was a sentence, she says. I shall steal it. For a letter. I will cite you in the margin. Send it to Baltimore, you say. Tell them court etiquette includes halting machines and aristocrats. I'll embroider it on a sampler, she says, and wanders off to be dangerous in some other corner. You take a breath that goes somewhere deeper than lungs and turn, straight into Lucille Hart. Not in gray this time, but in black that behaves like air. She should not be here. And yet, of course, she is. Houses like Pembroke's always hold. A door ajar for currency. She inclines her head with the grace of a person who has met every word for unwelcome and made it pay rent. Duchess, she says, congratulations on surviving court and supper. Miss Hart, you say. You are a surprise? I am often hired as one, she replies. Her eyes flick to Agatha, to Arthur across the threshold to the men's room where decanters do moral work, and back to you. Your terms were merciless. How refreshing. I prefer to pay early, you say. Then interest cannot accumulate. Take care, she murmurs. Some gentlemen prefer their debts to women in arrears. It makes them feel solvent. Then let them have what they feel, you say lightly. I will keep what we can count. She laughs, for real, startled and delighted, and steps aside in time for Arthur to arrive. There is a moment then, a tiny hinge, when you see how nights like this evolve marriages. Arthur's gaze scans your face for heat or harm, finds neither, and replaces anxiety with a pride he's still getting used to wearing. "You did not let her draw blood," he says, low. "I offered her a tourniquet instead." You answer. "Kind," he says. "Crueler." "Effective," you say. He looks as if he wants to touch your hand and thinks better of it, as if he wants to say thank you again and worries about dosage. "Pembroke spoke to me," he says instead. "Chadsworth told her. The county will stop waiting for us to embarrass them." "Then we must not," you say. "At least not by accident." The evening softens. Music learns to be background. Men return, smelling of agreements and fruit. James drifts by briefly, tilts his head the way one does to admire a line of verse with surprising footwork, and passes without speaking. The room has given you its verdict. You're in, conditionally, suspiciously, eagerly. That's enough. You can do good with enough. At home, Stevens frees you from the last of the pins, and the mirror returns you to yourself. The plumes sleep in their box. The train relaxes like a dog that can finally lie down. You sit while your hair becomes unargument. Again, and think about the currency of answers. How every room taxes speech differently. How truth can be coin or cudgel or both. Tonight, you spent one carefully. It bought you air. It cost you nothing you cannot afford. Arthur knocks, an odd, polite sound in a marriage that has often assumed doors are ornamental. "Come," you say, and he does. No brandy, no bluster. He stands by the threshold, as if remembering that some distances are useful. "You were very good," he says. "I was very myself," you answer. He considers. "I am learning the difference. I am learning how to be both," you say. He nods, serious. "We'll go down to the country next. Week," he adds. "Ashbourne wants a touch on the reins. The new thresher arrives. You may lecture it if you like. I'll make it write an apology to Tom," you say. He smiles and leaves you to sleep without new injuries. You lie back. The ceiling is not a ceiling, it is a map. Court, Supper, Chadsworth, Chelsea. Roads between them, some paved, some mud. You are walking them all now, not as a tourist, not as a captive, but as a person with destinations. Outside, London purrs. Somewhere across the river, a woman in black toasts your efficiency. Somewhere in Belgravia, Lady Agatha tells a version of tonight that makes her feel uncut. Somewhere, in a quiet room near Lincoln's Inn Fields, Bennett files a copy of your signature in a folder labeled Contingency, Hawks, Liberty. You sleep hard, not like a duchess in a painting, like a girl who worked. And in that sleep, your mind begins to hum a new tune. Not "Can I survive this?" but "How will I use it?" Ashbourne Park waits, fields, tenants, a new machine and an old name watching. There, a letter arrives that should not exist. A threat written in a familiar hand. To protect what you've built, you'll have to assemble your own council of war and for the first time, ask Arthur to choose a side before the house does. Ashbourne Park and the letter. That shouldn't exist. Country seats announce their philosophies from the drive. Ashbourne Park chooses candor. No coy curves, no sudden vistas engineered to make you gasp at precisely the right moment. Its mile-long approach goes straight as an oath. Hedges clipped to the grammar of a ledger. Oaks spaced like punctuation. The house itself is not a romantic. Palladian, restrained, a mind in stone. Symmetry that could balance accounts. A portico that expects plain speaking. Windows that look like they read. Arthur is different here. London fits him like an inheritance. That needs tailoring. Ashbourne fits him like an ancestor who has decided to be gentle. He takes off his hat under the portico and forgets to put it back on. "Home," he says, and the word fails to be mere geography. Inside, the hall is cool with the intention of old limestone. Stag heads look down with the weary tolerance of retired legends. The butler here is Mr. Greaves, a man whose face has learned to be both furniture and weather. "Welcome, your graces," he says, bow cut with a plumb line. The staff is assembled. They are in a half-moon between the twin staircases, housemaids, kitchen, laundry, 2 footmen who could be columns if underpaid, Mrs. Hales the housekeeper, a kind eye framed by exacting spectacles, and, a step apart as if rank were a contagious condition, Mr. Keene, the land steward. He is early 50s, tidy as a sermon, hair cropped to efficiency, eyes that keep a ledger before a soul. He bows the precise degree due to a duke, and the precise degree less than due to a duchess. You file the measurement without comment. Columns do not gossip. "Your Grace," Keene says to Arthur, "we've set the East Meadow for the new thresher. Delivery tomorrow by noon. The men will be on hand." "And safety?" you ask before you can stop yourself, habit stepping out of etiquette's shadow. Wedges, belts, a second flywheel, Tom, you catch yourself. Tom belongs to Chadsworth, and you will not make of him a traveling anecdote. We had a close call elsewhere. Keene glances at you as one glances at the weather, to be accounted for, not consulted. "Men know their business," he says. "The syllables do not bow." "Then men will not mind if I see it," you reply, smiling in the tone Lady Sibley calls polite defiance. Arthur lets the silence sit long enough to choose sides, then says mildly, "My wife will inspect the setup, Mr. Keene. She's developed a talent for preventing accidents." Mrs. Hales's mouth softens. One of the footman's eyes flickers. Approval, perhaps. Then flattens again to obedience. Keene's bow acknowledges an instruction, not an argument, won. "As you wish, your grace." What follows is the efficient catastrophe of arrival. Trunks migrate, hot water appears like a good idea realized, Stevens reinvents a closet into a command center, and you are walked on the string through the rooms. Morning room west, light, good for letters and decisions. Library, catalog, a miracle. Music room, a pianoforte that has forgiven more ballads than most marriages, and the small parlor at the back where the house stops performing and starts breathing. You ask to see the estate office before the tea tray lands. Greaves blinks. No duchess has asked for it on a first day, his blink says, but leads you over the inner courtyard to the low building that smells like wood, ink, and wheat. Ledgers, maps, rent rolls, a high desk for Keene, a lower one for the clerk, a stove that could be kinder. On one wall, a schedule pinned with tapes, harvest timetable, shearing, planting rotation. You stand in the center and hear your father's voice, not his words exactly. He spoke in handshakes and numbers, but his teaching. Know where the money learns to walk. Keene stands at his post. "The rents are current," he says before you ask. "The winter wheat was heavy. We'll see barley up 3% if the weather stops arguing." "And the cottages?" you ask. "Roofs tight, wells clean, the school roof? We have always managed," he says, voice wrapped in the blanket of "we do not take instruction from Mayfair." Arthur's tone remembers the telegram and the treaty. "We will manage better," he says. "My wife will review. You will assist." Keene bows again, the geometry correct and the consent not. The tenants come as the day cools, the way tenants do when they want to see what sort of season a duchess might be. Mothers with babies who stare frankly at silk. Old men who measure you as one measures whether you cannot move. Boys who will be men next summer. Girls with hands that can spin a farm out of thin air. You let them talk and do not perform saintliness. This is not charity hour. This is inventory of a different kind. A girl, Martha, 11, tells you in earnest fury that the schoolroom's chimney draws backwards in a south wind and makes the alphabet taste like soot. You promise a sweep and a new cap, and you mean it. In the evening, After a dinner that tastes like the kitchen has decided to impress you by reminding you you're mortal, a pie that has time in it, greens that know dirt, you walk outside with Arthur. The East Meadow is a suggestion in the twilight, the hedges black and square against the bruised sky. It will be a week, he says, the quiet kind he's learning from you, before the room stops looking at you to see whether you will be a storm. I am always weather, you say. I am trying to be rain, not wind. He is looking at you the way a man looks at an instrument he did not know he owned. Tell me if you need me to stand in a doorway and be tall, he says, half a joke and half an offer. I may ask you to be a wall, you say, and sometimes a window. He considers. Walls keep, windows change, he says. Then I will be both, badly at first. Morning, a sky like clean paper. The thresher arrives before noon with the drama of a soldier and the patience of an ox. Wheels too big to be polite, belts sleeping in coils, a boiler that looks like a sermon. Men gather with that particular male happiness. A new machine is a new story. You count heads, too many boys, not enough wedges, and make a point of seeing where Keene stands. Not too close, not too far, like a general watching a second in command. Lead a charge he did not propose. Wedges, you ask the smith. Aye, he says, and shows you two, worn so thin by competence they are nearly ideas. 4 more, you say. Ash saw, and a cart rope, there, double it. If the belt leaps, we want it to leap into a future, not a throat. He nods. Men like instructions that respect physics. The demonstration is exactly what demonstrations are. A display for the house as much as the men. The first sheaf goes in with ceremony. The first bushels spill with satisfaction. Chaff flies and babies. Sneeze and the older tenants do the mental math. How many hands spared? How many hands displaced? And you feel the room tilt on the fulcrum of a century. It is near enough to triumph that when Greaves jogs across the yard, Greaves, who does not jog, you go cold before the words arrive. Your Grace, he says, voice formal and breathless. A message. It was left pinned to the granary door. He holds out an envelope you have already recognized without seeing. The heavy paper Arthur uses only for private notes. The thick, dark ink. The way the A in Ashbourne arches its crossbar like a bridge. A familiar hand, Arthur's. But the seal is broken, and the scent is wrong. Cologne you do not know, faint and expensive, the city inside the country. You slide out a single sheet. The first sentence is a blow. Call off your charity theatricals and your American. Contrivances. The park is not a stage for your redemption. The machine will fail. Perhaps a man will fail with it. You will take your pretty hands back to town, or we will put them back for you. A.A. The letter shouldn't exist for 12 reasons in the time it takes you to draw one breath. Arthur would not write it. Arthur's hand has never been cruel, only hurried. And yet the curves and hooks are his. You have watched them in the margins of books and in the notes he leaves when he chooses silence over breakfast. Someone has copied him, or someone has taken what is his to write. A forgery or a theft. Both are an intimacy you did not consent to. Arthur reads over your shoulder. The right kind of trespass now. The kind that tells you he is not afraid of. The same wound you are. He goes still the way men go still when their name has been used in a place that will stain it. Keene, he says, with no drama and all decision. Keene comes fast, too fast. Guilt moves quickly or loyalty does. He takes the paper. His face conserves expression. Childish, he pronounces. A boy with ink and nerves. And your opinion on the A? You ask mildly. It has learned to walk like my husband's. Anyone could copy a hand. Keene says. The post in the village has been careless. Perhaps the letter is old. It was pinned to the granary 10 minutes ago, Greaves says, and surprises all of you by keeping steel in his voice. by someone who can walk quicker than rumor. Arthur's jaw tightens. He does not look at you. He looks at the house, the meadow, the machine, the three pillars of his position. "Greaves," he says, "close the yard. No lads. Only the men who know the belt. Mrs. Hales, send the little ones to the far orchard with jam and a scandalous quantity of bread. Mr. Keene, with me." He strides away toward the office. Keene follows. Greaves peels off like competence incarnate. You stand very still in the middle of a yard, about to remember a bad harvest and choose what kind of weather you will be. "Stevens," you say, and she is there as if the house grew her. "Send to the village for Inspector Hartley. Tell him he is expected, not invited." You learned the difference from Lady Pembroke. "Send to town as well. No, faster. A telegram to Bennett. Forgery, threat, need counsel and discreet eyes. And one to Mrs. Ashford, to Mrs. Winchester, and to Lady Helena Winters. Ashbourne requires tea and strategy at once. Come with hats and sharper things." Sharper. "Things?" Stevens repeats. "Deadpan. Tongues," you say. "And if Mr. Winters is in town, add him to the list of sharpness. He knows the kind that lives in clubs." Stevens inclines her head, which is how she says, "Very good warfare, your grace," and vanishes. You walk to the machine because fear is an invitation to clumsiness. The men have felt the mood shift and begun to behave like dogs do when thunder is telling secrets. You put your hand on the boiler, warm, steady. "Break," you say. 10 minutes. Bread by the orchard. I will not have a man hungry where there is rope. They obey because orders are easier than dread, because you say bread like logistics, not kindness. By the time you reach the stable to borrow a quieter corner, Arthur is already there, pacing, between a pair of mares who have decided to ignore him. He hands you a second paper, the copy of a copy. Keene says the hand is a good one. He says anyone could have taken a discarded note of mine from town and shaped a threat. With it, you finish calmly. Do you believe him? Arthur's first answer is the honest one. Silence. His second is what a duke is allowed. Keene keeps the books. He knows every stone by its nickname. He was my father's man before he was mine. I believe in his competence. Competence has been known to commit crimes, you say. It often manages them better than passion. He stops pacing. The mares finally honor him with a look. Say what you think, he tells you. It is not a challenge. It is permission. I think the letter is not a boy's. It knows my nerves. It calls the thresher contrivance and my work theatrical. That is the language of men who think anything done by a woman is a performance. I think the A is deliberate, because it wants you to suspect yourself on my behalf. I think that whoever wrote it has touched your hand enough to steal it. Keene signs my name on receipts when I am away, he says slowly. The postmistress keeps an eagle's nest of gossip. Greaves's nephew works at the printer's. Lucille Hart? He stops, and you admire his willingness to say the name into air that also contains hay and your breath, has seen the notepaper. In my rooms. You consider that with the severity of a judge remembering mercy. Lucille would be cleverer, you say. Her threats are private favors. This is a public trap. He exhales once, astonished by the relief of having someone call a mistress clever without using the word like a stone. Very well. Then Keene is either involved or negligent. Either way, I cannot allow him to be the only wall between my house and a fuse. Then we assemble a council, you say. Yours and mine, in daylight, with witnesses. You stand on one side of the table. I stand at your shoulder. Keene stands where his shadow does not fall on the map. He nods once, and something in the room shifts allegiance. Perhaps only a horsefly choosing a different flank. Perhaps history. By late afternoon, the house has gathered itself into a kind of parliament. Mrs. Hales presides over tea as if the sugar tongs can influence truth. Greaves stands by the door, a sentinel with better biscuits. Inspector Hartley arrives with the undemonstrative competence of a man who prefers facts to status. Emma and Catherine sweep in together, skirts and brains in quart abundance. Helena Winters follows, smiling like a knife in a velvet purse. And James? James is the draft in the doorway that makes a hot room breathe, arriving without fanfare, taking a citation from Greaves as if it were a glass of water, and placing himself out of the sunlight where he can see without being seen. You lay out the paper on a side table cleared of lilies. A threat, you say. Written in my husband's hand by someone who isn't my husband. Left where the machine would find it. Inspector Hartley peers, sniffs, literally, then nods. City ink, he says. Not the estates. Paper. Cut with a blade too fine for our stationer, the A-apes. His Grace's hand, but the pressure on the downstrokes is wrong. A copyist who writes with zeal, not habit. Zeal, Helena repeats, amused. Is the word we use when men have opinions and no schedule. Motives, Emma says briskly. Who is injured by the machine? Hands who fear dismissal. A steward who fears novelty. A supplier who loses a sale if we prefer a rival. A landlord who prefers dependence to improvement. Or a man who wants to pry this house open along the seam between Duke and Duchess, Catherine adds. If you quarrel, in public, everything else becomes cheaper. James clears his throat just enough to be allowed. There is another, he says. A creditor with a nervous calendar may wish to hurry an outcome. Fear makes excellent leverage. If word got out that Ashbourne is unsafe, notes could be called terms tightened. He looks at Arthur carefully. Any man whom you have recently denied an extension could be warming this mischief. Arthur's mouth tightens, then relaxes into honesty. Braithwaite, he says, of the horse sale. I paid him promptly last month, but not in the way he likes. I sent it through Bennett instead of through his hands. Braithwaite, Helena muses, whose wife collects adjectives. How tidy. And the steward, Hartley says without prejudice. We will look at his movements. And his ink. Meanwhile, you say, because strategy is nothing without choreography, we keep the machine. We post a night watch, 2 men who cannot be bribed by anything smaller than a county. We bring the village to a demonstration on Saturday with jam and music and a doctor on a chair. We teach every boy where to stand and where to run. We stack wedges until the shed thinks it sells them. We make safety a festival and sabotage a lonely sport. Emma grins. I brought ribbons, she says. I thought we might need them to tie back idiocy. Helena, you say, write a charming paragraph for the Morning Post about the American Duchess who prefers oil to ornament. Let it be so boringly virtuous that only a fool would oppose it. With pleasure, she says. I do a fine line in useful dullness. James, you add, and he looks at you with that precise attentiveness you have come to rely upon. Find out who in the village can forge a hand that fools a butler and a tired duke. Do not frighten him. Offer him work copying hymns. Understood, he says. If he refuses the hymn book, we'll know his conscience is professional. Inspector, Arthur says, moving to stand beside you the way men move to a map before a battle. You will coordinate the watch with Greaves. Keene remains steward pending inquiry, but he does not touch the thresher or the accounts this week. He will not like it. That is not the weather today. Hartley's hat remains in his hands because hats are weapons where truth is present. Yes, Your Grace. And Keene? Catherine asks, eyebrows mild, words sharpened. Is he in this room or out? Arthur looks at you. It is the first time he has done it in a room full of people who can turn that glance into stories. Choose, his eyes say. Not for me or against me, but with me. Out, you say, because negotiations with a man who may be forging your husband's hand are not improved by cake. For now. Arthur nods, and something that has been unbuilt Between you begins to take scaffolding from the air itself. "Greaves," he says, and the butler is enjoyably already moving. "Send word that Mr. Keene is indisposed. Mrs. Hales, see that the steward's office is aired and that the drawer locks are mended. Miss—" He stops, looks to you. "Martha, you supply. Martha's chimney will draw by supper," he finishes. "The school is the first roof tomorrow." Mrs. Hales's eyes shine behind the spectacles that never have, and you realize she has been waiting 5 years to be permitted to be excellent. The council adjourns itself as good councils do, not with applause, but with people picking up work. Inspector Hartley disappears to count ink pots. Emma commandeers a table for ribbon logistics. Helena borrows your writing case and sends a sentence into London that will make you seem both dull and necessary. James goes into the yard and becomes a shadow with ears. You remain with Arthur in the quiet echo after useful noise. "Thank you," he says, not the way men say it to women at parties. "You asked me to choose before the house did. I have been letting the house choose me for a decade." "Then let it choose us," you say simply. "It will like the change. Houses prefer the people who fix roofs." He looks at the letter again, at the curve of the A that is and is not his. "If Keene," he begins, "then we remove him with dignity and proof," you say. "And if not, we remove someone else with those same 2 tools." He nods. "There's a thing I must do," he adds, after a pause in which he decides to be a better man than his fear. "Tonight, I'll go to the city, to end something properly so it cannot be used against us." He does not say Lucille's name. He does not need to. You do not look away. "Be discreet," you say. "And be kind. We aren't the only people with thresholds to invent." For a long time after he leaves, the dusk works its steady science on the lawn. Stevens finds you at the window with the letter in your lap, and without comment, she brings you a shawl. Outside, the thresher hunches in profile like a beast that can be taught. In the distance, children shriek at jam as if it were theater. Closer, by, Greaves posts 2 men where rope will not try to murder them. The house settles, not into complacency, but into readiness. You read the letter again. It is a clumsy threat, and it is a perfect diagnosis. Whoever wrote it knows that the first thing to sabotage is trust. So you inventory yours. Arthur, not certainty, but decision. Bennett, paper shield. Emma and Catherine, tactics and tea. Helena, ink. James, air. Mrs. Hales and Greaves, sinew. Stevens, spine. It is not a bad army for a duchess with American. Hands, and still, there is that A, like a door someone used without knocking. You put the paper away, not because you are finished with it, but because you refuse to let it bruise your bedtime. You sleep like people do when tomorrow requires a parade and a barricade at once. In the morning, the village comes. Music, pastries, the doctor on his chair pretending he doesn't love being the center of safety, ribbons on the wedges because Emma believes in morale. You pin a blue strip in Martha's hair for the chimney that will draw. The belt hums. The engine behaves. For 20 minutes, the future cooperates. Then a shout. Then a sound the machine shouldn't make. Then smoke where smoke doesn't belong. There are a handful of seconds in which a house learns whether its people are rehearsed. You find the rope. James is already at the governor. Greaves has his hands on a boy's collar. Inspector Hartley swears amiably and becomes a wedge. You are 3 strides from the flywheel when you see it. A nail driven where no nail belongs, the kind of sabotage that looks like accident if you want it to. It will cost you a hand to pull it while the belt is running. It will cost someone a life if you don't. You go for the nail because that is the weather you are. And out of the corner of your eye, you see Arthur, hatless as under the portico. Coat open, running like a man who has chosen the same cost. The machine's scream becomes a trial. In the smoke and afterward, proof will surface. A ledger entry, a cent on a seal, a loyalty declared out loud. But the bill will demand one last payment, a public confession that could save the house and scorch your name, or silence that protects you and ruins a man who might yet be worth saving. The 12th and final part asks what a duchess owes to truth, to love, and to the story she has chosen to write. The scream, the trial, the truth. The world narrows to a nail, not a metaphor, an actual iron thing driven where iron should not be, glinting meanly in the shallow breath between belt and wheel. The machine's note pitches higher, that horrible, almost human scream engines find when they want what you do not. You go for it. Your left hand braces on the frame, hot, too hot. Your right finds the nail's head through kid leather and intent. Rope sings somewhere low. Children inhale from far away and forget the exhale. The belt judders, 1, 2, and then, now, Arthur says, arriving like a decision. He's all shirt sleeves and concentration, the wedge already in his palm. His body in that exact angle you have learned means I am not thinking about my dignity, and therefore I might be useful. You pull. It doesn't move. Of course it doesn't. Sabotage never offers the discount price. Winters, steam, Arthur throws over his shoulder without looking. Already courting it, James replies from the governor. The understatement of an Englishman who is chatting up death and prefers not to bore her. Greaves' boy out. You hear? And a pair of feet leave the ground by the collar. Inspector Hartley becomes a hinge at your elbow, his hands on the belt with that amiable profanity men reserve for inanimate objects planning manslaughter. On 3, Your Grace, he says, and you love him briefly with the clean love reserved for the competent. 1, 2, 3, you rip. The nail gives the way men do when they realize you meant it. A sudden, ugly surrender. The belt snatches the gap like a dog punished for stealing. The wedge slams home. Arthur rides a kick of force that could have thrown him, absorbs it, sets it down. The machine coughs, stutters, chooses life. Silence falls so fast it makes a sound. Only, then does your hand remember it was touching something that forgot to be kind. Blood does the neat trick of not caring if you are a duchess. It beads. Then begins the long, slow apprenticeship to stain. Arthur's face changes at the sight of your glove. Anger, fear, a kind of gratitude so naked it might as well be kneeling. He takes your wrist, careful, as if the pulse has value, and examines the damage the way he examines a map. For roots, not blame. Scald, Hartley pronounces, not deep. It will be very fashionable, you say, light-headed. All the best ladies will be wearing American Idiot. Laughter, blessed, ragged, real, spills from throats that were holding screams. The doctor on his chair dismounts, his throne for the pleasure of being important, and wraps your hand in linen and competence. The children begin to breathe. The men begin to talk, loudly, relieved, all the things that mean a village has remembered how to be one. Again, you say because fear grows if you feed it rest. We run her again. But we run her safely and we run her for everyone, and we do not go to bed with a story about breakdown. And because you say it like an order and a prayer at once, they do. The belt purrs, grain obliges. The thresher, chastened, behaves like a creature that can be taught. Ribbons look less ridiculous than they did an hour ago. Then the trial begins. Not in Oakham Assizes, in your morning room. Courts in houses happen where the light is honest. The evidence enters with its own posture. Inspector Hartley lays out the nail on a folded towel as if it had dignity. Filed deliberately, he says, pointing to a wrongness so tiny it requires a moral microscope. Head shaved to slip a wrench, shaft beveled to catch the belt. He does not look at Keene. That is kindness or strategy. Sometimes they're the same. Helena Winters, who treats perfume like an indictment, holds the envelope under her clever nose, inhales, and smiles the smile of a woman who enjoys being correct. Not bay rum, she says, not sandalwood. This is poudre du Portugal, a vulgar scent adored by men who want to smell like their money is older than their breath. Lord Braithwaite wears it in such quantities that one can follow him through a garden without asking permission. Emma, who enjoys ribbons and war, produces a scrap of green velvet ribbon from her reticule like a magician. Found on the granary. Latch under the thumbtack. Braithwaite's grooms tie their crops with it on hunt days. Lady Agatha insists. She says it photographs well. James arrives as if arriving casually were his trade and sets down a small tin of blacking. The sign painter from the village, he says, will be making hymn sheets for the school for the next 6 months because he feels contrite and because I paid him. He says a man with a club voice and a city hat asked him to copy the Duke's hand from an envelope at the post. He thought it a joke. He is now aware he must sharpen both his conscience and his knife. Keene stands very straight, like a man who believes his posture can save him from gravity. Braithwaite, he says, perfectly calm. Who else? He dislikes that I insisted we use Bennett. He dislikes the Duchess. He dislikes change and hides that dislike in horses. But the yard is my charge. I failed it. The room waits for the rest. He makes you wait because men of that generation have been taught that delay lends sincerity. My clerk, Tomlin, was approached. He continues. He took coin and gossip. He was told to put the nail, not to kill, to mar the day, to make the machine seem a toy. I discovered enough to smell a rat, not enough to catch it. I kept Tomlin because his mother is ill and because we cannot afford to lose men who know the names of our fields. I told myself I would watch. Watching is not the same as seeing. I tender my resignation. There is your loyalty declared out, loud. It is not a confession, it is a choice. He could have thrown Tomlin to the wolves. Instead, he lays himself down and asks the wolves to be reasonable. Pride, yes. Also love, the kind Englishmen encode in words like duty, because the other nouns choke them. Arthur does not look at you first. He looks at the house, because for all his sins and all his learning, he belongs to stone. Then he does look at you. And that is the difference between the man who married his fortune and the man who has decided to live with his wife. Sit down, Keene, he says. Resignation refused for the moment. Consequences first. Then we decide who remains standing. Hartley clears his throat with professional opportunism. If your graces desire to press charges, he says, my inspector's heart will beat 2 extra beats. There is forgery. There is sabotage. There is the small matter of a village nearly becoming a funeral. You could, God, you could, drag Braithwaite by his ribbons through a court, watch Lady Agatha fold herself up like a bad map, hold the village's applause in your pocket for dark days. You could also set the county on fire. Fires warm and destroy in equal measure. Not yet, you say. We report to the magistrate in confidence. We remove the groom. We remove Tomlin to a different county with a reference that mentions tidiness and omits proximity to belts. We remove Lord Braithwaite from the guest list of history. Done, Arthur says. You hope someday you will still love him with this strange gust of admiration. You suspect you will. And the letter, Helena asks. The A that isn't an A. How do you shut a door someone else has learned to open? Arthur answers by doing the thing he has hated more than debt. He tells the truth in public, not to the county at large, not to Parliament, to the people who can ruin him properly, his tenants, his staff, his neighbors who will choose whether to call what you do reform or American. He stands on the low wall by the east yard after the second demonstration, the one you insisted on, the one you made as pretty as a sermon, and speaks in the voice he saves for hunting and command. You've had a letter waved under your noses, in the granary, he says. No euphemism, no lace. It used my hand to tell my wife to return to the city and my house to return to its ignorance. It lied twice. First about the hand, second about the house. He takes a breath. The sky holds it. I have been a poor steward of fashion and a worse one of pride, he says. There is a ripple. Men are unused to hearing dukes speak in nouns that fit other men. I preferred my club to my books. I believed change was a threat when it was a tool. I mistook silence for peace. I have put an end to all of that. There it is, the public confession, bloodless and bloody both. He does not say, Lucille, he does not have to. Men who wear club scent will hear it. Women who wash their husbands' shirts will smell it. My wife is my partner in this estate, he goes on, and you do not look down or away because you have earned the sentence. No accounts will be paid without her hand. No machines will be run without her eyes. No child will learn his letters in smoke. There is no applause. There is something better, the quiet of shared intention. You have begun something the room has decided to own. After, in the shade of the south wall, Lucille Hart arrives and does the bravest thing a woman of her trade can do. She makes herself small without becoming invisible. She wears gray again, as if conceding color to someone else for once, and holds a small sealed packet. I prefer to end things with silk, she says softly to you. But the times call for twine. She offers you Arthur's signet, the smaller one, for personal notes. He asked last night, kindly. I like kindness even when it ends me. I do not like being made a letter. Nor do I, you say. You take the signet. You do not thank her. Gratitude implies a debt you do not owe. But you incline your head in the exact degree of respect earned by a woman who did not fling a lamp and call it love. Keep him honest, she says, faint amusement, covering a species of grief. You have the hands for it. I have a machine for it, you reply. That afternoon lives its afterglow properly. The school chimney is capped by supper. Martha's hair ribbon collects flour instead of soot. Mrs. Hales invents a cake large enough to teach generosity. Greaves permits himself a joke and is mobbed as if he were a circus. Inspector Hartley leaves with a list of errands and a promise to keep his hat off more often. James vanishes like a well-thrown shadow. Emma and Catherine commit new gossip to memory and tie it with a bow. Helena sits at your writing desk and pens a paragraph so exquisitely boring, in praise of farm safety, in favor of wedges with a line about the Duchess's sensibly gloved hands, that any man who speaks against it will appear to hate children. Keene reports at dusk, hat in hand, not as symbol, but as fact. Tomlin is on the coach, he says. He cried. He will be a clerk in Ipswich for a corn merchant who does not own a belt. I have taken his mother a basket and my stupidity. And you? Arthur asks, no flourish. Keene meets his eyes with a relief that looks like pain. If you'll have me, your grace, I'll stay. But I'll have the ledgers on your wife's desk by 9 every Friday. And we'll hammer the new wedges ourselves, she and I, and paint them red so the boys know. They're not toys. That will do, you say. That will do very well. Night comes on generous and lemon-scented. The lawns perform their usual trick of being eternity. The house remembers without cruelty. You sit with Arthur on the back steps. No audience, no rehearsal, the sort of sitting that deserves to be a marriage all by itself. I said it, he murmurs, as if you might have missed it. Out loud. You did, you say. You do not gild it with praise. Praise is another sort of debt. Better to let the sentence live in the air long enough to build muscle. He turns your bandaged hand in the last of the day. Does it hurt? It will make writing to New York more dramatic. Tell them we have a machine that screams, he says, and a village that doesn't. I will tell them we have a house that listens, you reply, and a duke who decided to be a man in it, he smiles, tired and unperformed, and a duchess who is not leaving, he adds, watching your face for the flinch that would mean there is still a door you haven't locked. I told you on the ship, you remind him. I intend to be difficult to remove. You expect a joke. He offers instead a small vow. Then, I intend to be worth the trouble. Later, after Stevens ungirds you from your bravery, after the lamps confess to sleep, after the house finishes counting itself, you write 2 letters. The first to Bennett. Proceed with our arrangement as planned, but return the signet with your next packet. We won't be needing it for secret work. The second to the dollar, duchesses. If anyone requires a manual on belts, nails, husbands, stewards, creditors, or courage, Ashbourne will print one. Tea provided, wedges optional, truth compulsory. Arthur arrives earlier than his habit. He does not kiss your hand. He doesn't always. He doesn't look at Pierce. He always does. He goes straight to the envelope tray because bankers train men better than mothers. He reads. His face performs. The 3 acts of a certain male drama: confusion, offense, calculation. He rounds on the room and finally remembers it contains you. What is the meaning of this? He asks. The way generals ask hills why they exist. Bankers disapprove of surprises, you say. Do they? He replies, and strides toward the study. You follow at a distance that can be read as courtesy or as observation, choosing which is part of your art now. In the study, he turns like a stopped toy. Have you? His mouth discovers the word interfered and decides it is ungentlemanly. Made changes? I have protected what saves us both, you say. Protected, he repeats, as if tasting a foreign fruit. My dowry has not been a dowry, you say. It has been a fountain. Fountains are charming when they are not draining the reservoir. He stares. Then his eyes narrow. You went through my papers. I went through my life, you say. They were nearby. That is not how this works. That is precisely how it works, you say. So calmly he takes a step back and doesn't notice. I am not shaming you. I am limiting the damage. By stealing from me, he says. And it is almost funny if you were hungrier for humor. By reclaiming from the track and from Chelsea what was never theirs, you say. The name lands between you like a pistol placed carefully on a table. He does not ask, what do you know? He is too intelligent to waste time. He asks, who told you? Your ledgers, you say. They are not sentimental. He presses his fingers into his temples, a man bracing against weather. You have no idea. I have many. You interrupt. I have the idea of girls at the docks with empty plates, of tenants who count their children at night because it comforts them, of a house that will not feed itself on portraits, of a man who may prefer speed to sense, of a woman who sells silence as if it were perfume. I have so many ideas, Arthur, I could start a school. He drops his hands and looks at you levelly. What do you want? Terms. You practiced them with Bennett. You refined them with Catherine. You honed them alone at the window while London pretended to be gentle. Now you dispense them like a responsible apothecary. Half of my settlement, secured beyond your reach. Income from those funds available for the house and estates at my discretion. Any further investment only with my co-signature. Wagers accounted for in a book I can read. The Chelsea retainer terminated within the month. If you require arrangements, you refuse to soften the word. Be discreet and pay for them, with an allowance from funds that will not affect tenants or staff. Household authority remains mine. Estate accounts open to me monthly. In public, we will be excellent. He watches you as if he has wandered into a performance and discovered it is an education. When he speaks, it is slower. And if I refuse? Then we will discover whether scandal costs you more pride than limits, you say. I do not bluff. He turns away, then back, sits, stands, a man trying postures on. Finally, he leans his hands on the desk, head bowed as if the wood can answer. When he looks up, the expression is not rage. It is a reluctant respect that frightens you more than anger would. You have changed, he says. No, you say. I have stopped pretending not to be myself. He laughs, short, unwilling, real. Bennett? He asks. Bennett, you confirm. Of course, he says, a particular acid seeping into Ov. How many of you does he shelter these days? As many as need roofs that do not leak, you say. He picks up the pen that signed his name to 100 stupidities and twirls it as if it were a blade he might learn to fear. I will meet him, he says. I will not invite him to my club. He will accept one of those outcomes, you say. And Chelsea, he says, gazing past you at the map of Ashbourne lands as if London could be annexed by will. You expect me to dismiss. I expect you to behave as a man who respects his wife, you say. Whether you love me is irrelevant. Whether you intend to build with me is not. Something shifts in the room that is not furniture. He straightens. Very well, he says finally, and the words are brittle enough to cut. Half secured, accounts open to your view, an allowance for my personal idiocies, discretion. I will speak with heart. Good, you say, and do not fling your relief around the room like flowers. There is one more term. He raises an eyebrow that expects impertinence. Yes. You will not police my friendships, you say. I am not asking you to like them. I am requiring you to tolerate them. Remington, he says, and the name rings like a glass someone tapped too hard. Among others, you say simply. Silence, except for the clock, which has learned a new language during this conversation, the grammar of revised lives. Then Arthur nods once, a concession that is almost admiration. You will make my house very difficult to run away from, he says. That is the point of a house, you say. Bennett comes that evening because he understood from the telegram what must happen next. The conversation is civil in the way duels are strict rules, all movement deliberate. Arthur bargains for face, Bennett bargains for fact. You sit and watch and decline tea and offer it again later and hold a line with your posture when a sentence might wobble it. Papers are drawn, initialed, signed. Bennett places them in his case and nods to you with a respect that warms without flattering. When he leaves, Arthur pours a brandy and does not offer you one because he has not yet learned that some gestures are invitations to the future. He stares into the glass and says, almost conversationally, you will go to Hart. Yes, you say. Why? He asks, genuinely curious, as if he is learning a foreign alphabet. Because thieves are less successful in the dark if you bring a lantern, you say. And because she will develop a narrative in which I am brittle and breakable, and I would like to edit it. You will not, he says. Break, I mean. No, you say. And the word does not ride on pride. It stands on practice. He lifts his glass in a small salute that is not a truce and not a surrender, an acknowledgement. Be careful, he says. It is either the most he can give or the least. Either way, you accept it as a beginning. Hook. The E. Chelsea door opens to the woman who takes what the city offers and charges interest. She expects tears. You bring invoices. The house that sells Silence Chelsea pretends not to be fashionable while charging for the pretense. The street is a lesson in curated restraint. Brick that knows it was chosen, ivy that never risks vulgarity, windows that practice innocence. Lucille Hart's door is black, polished, and domesticated myth. You could see your face in it if you needed to know whether you are the person you intended to be. You do not send in a card. Cards are for people requesting rooms. You have rented your courage. The maid who answers has seen every variety of woman and files you accordingly. The sort who will be shown in, because refusing her would be more expensive than receiving her. Lucille receives you in a drawing room designed to be photographed by people who don't believe cameras steal souls. It is smaller than Duncliffe's, smarter than most galleries, and not a museum. Museums do not pulse. She stands as if she invented vertical. She wears gray that makes charcoal jealous. Her face is a manifesto in clean lines. She smiles. Teeth are perfect and uninterested in you. Duchess, she says, know your grace. She knows the price of titles and prefers cash. Miss Hart, you say, and refuse to glance at the lilies arranged as though virtue were a fragrance. She waves you to a chair and chooses one equal in height. Tea? Or shall we agree we have outgrown props? Tea, you say. Props relax witnesses. A small sound that might be amusement. Might be the first note of a song she gives to only the most expensive listeners. Tea appears. Poured. Placed. The ritual done so well it congratulates itself. We are modern women, she says, as if writing the preface to a book about your extinguishment. We transact. You invoice, you say. I audit. Her eyebrows confess respect. Few people push back. Fewer do so without rattling the cups. Very well. Speak in terms. Terms? You repeat lightly, as if your mouth is not dry. Your father purchased a dukedom, she says. Your husband purchased peace. Everyone buys. My work is to maintain the illusion that some things are borrowed. And when illusions become theft, you say, I adjust the bill. Then we are women in the same shop, she replies, folding her hands. What do you propose to adjust, Duchess? First, the retainer, you say. It ends. You will be compensated to sever it. And if the Duke resists? Will not, you say. He prefers pride that can dine at his club to appetites that must eat in the street. The retainer is a small part of my accounts, she says. I am not hungry enough to bargain like a vendor. She looks around her rooms with an owner's love. They look back with a lover's smirk. That being said, small parts ruin engines. Second, you say, the lilies. They are a message. Stop sending messages to my house. You have my attention.